The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, smearing rain faster than they could clear it. Elena Carter gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white as her headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness. The mountain road twisted treacherously, hugging cliffs that vanished into pitch-black valleys on one side and rose into jagged rock faces on the other. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself, the words lost beneath thunder that seemed to shake the very mountains. She hadn't expected a storm this violent when she'd set out for Aunt Claire's cabin in Silver Pine Valley. But then she hadn't expected much of anything that had happened these past 6 months. Not David's betrayal, not the restraining order that followed, not the way her entire life in Seattle had unraveled thread by thread until there was nothing left but escape. The cabin was supposed to be her sanctuary, remote enough that no one would find her, peaceful enough that she might finally sleep through the night, if she could just make it there. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in stark white relief. In that flash, something darted across the road, something massive and dark. Elena slammed the brakes. The tires lost traction immediately, hydroplaning across the slick asphalt. She fought the wheel as the car spun, her world becoming a blur of rain and forest and cliff edge, terrifyingly close. The impact when she hit the guardrail knocked the breath from her lungs. For a moment, she sat frozen, hands still clenched on the wheel, heart hammering against her ribs. The engine sputtered once, twice, then died. Only the headlights remained, cutting twin beams through the storm, and in those beams stood what she'd swerved to avoid. A wolf, not just any wolf, the largest she had ever seen. Its shoulder would reach her waist, its massive head almost level with her chest. Midnight black fur, sleek with rain, clung to a powerful frame. But what stole Elena's breath wasn't its size, it was its eyes. They caught the headlights and reflected back an impossible amber gold, too bright, too aware. They locked onto her through the windshield with an intelligence that made her skin prickle with goosebumps. "That's not possible," she whispered. The wolf swayed slightly, and that's when Elena noticed the dark stain spreading across its flank. Blood, diluted pink by rain, streaming from a wound she couldn't quite see. The creature took one stumbling step forward, then collapsed onto the asphalt. Before she could think better of it, Elena was fumbling with her seatbelt, shoving open the car door, stepping out into the storm. Rain instantly soaked through her jacket, plastering her dark hair to her face and neck. The wind cut like a knife, but she barely felt it as she approached the fallen animal. "I should be running the other way," she muttered, inching closer. "This is insane!" The wolf's chest heaved with labored breaths. Up close, Elena could see what had wounded it. What looked like an arrow or bolt protruded from its side, the shaft broken off, leaving only a few inches visible among the matted fur. Someone had shot it, hunted it. The creature's eyes fluttered open as she knelt beside it. A low growl rumbled in its chest, not threatening, but pained. Those eyes fixed on her again, and Elena felt something inexplicable pass between them. A connection, a recognition that defied logic. "I won't hurt you," she said softly, reaching out a trembling hand. The wolf watched her, unnervingly still except for the rise and fall of its massive chest. When her fingertips brushed its rain-soaked fur, a jolt like static electricity shot up her arm. The wolf flinched, but didn't snap at her. That was when the howls began. At first, Elena thought it was the wind, but the sound crystallized, becoming distinct, purposeful, a long, mournful call that echoed through the mountains. Then another joined it, and another, surrounding them, drawing closer. The injured wolf's ears pricked forward. It tried to rise, legs scrambling against the wet road, but fell back with a whine that sounded almost human in its distress. Fear flooded Elena's veins like ice water. Whatever was coming through those trees wasn't friendly, not to the wolf, and probably not to her. The wounded creature looked at her again, and in that moment, illuminated by another flash of lightning, she could have sworn she saw something impossible. For just a heartbeat, the wolf's face seemed to shift, to blur, and in its place, she glimpsed a man's features, contorted in pain, eyes the same impossible gold. Then darkness fell again, and it was just the wolf struggling to stand. I'm hallucinating, Elena gasped. This isn't happening. But the approaching howls were very real. They were getting closer, more frenzied. The wolf at her feet looked toward the tree line, then back at her with desperate urgency. Without fully understanding why, Elena knew she couldn't leave him here. It would be death, for him, and perhaps for her too if she stayed much longer. I'm going to help you, she said, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. My car's stuck, but the cabin can't be more than half a mile ahead. The wolf's gaze held hers, and Elena had the unsettling feeling it understood every word. She slid her arms beneath its massive body, bracing herself to lift. The animal was impossibly heavy, but adrenaline surged through her, lending her strength she didn't know she possessed. As she struggled to her feet, the wolf's weight threatening to buckle her knees, another howl cut through the night, closer than the others, filled with a savage intent that made her blood run cold. They're hunting you, she whispered, staggering forward. And now they're hunting me too. The storm swallowed her words as she lurched down the road, clutching the injured wolf to her chest, rainwater and blood mingling as it ran down her arms. Lightning revealed the path ahead in stuttering glimpses. Behind them, shadows moved at the forest's edge. Elena didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. Not with the strange, heavy certainty settling in her chest that tonight had changed everything, that by saving this creature, she had stepped across some invisible threshold into a world she couldn't begin to understand. A world where wolves had human eyes, where storms brought fate to your doorstep, and where the dark held secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. Elena's arms burned, muscles straining under the wolf's impossible weight. She staggered forward through sheets of rain, her boots slipping on the muddy road. Each step was agony, each breath a sharp knife in her lungs. But something stronger than logic drove her onward, an instinct she couldn't name. Couldn't fight, just a little further, she gasped, though she had no idea if that was true. The wolf lay eerily still against her chest, its massive body radiating unnatural heat despite the cold rain. Blood, both his and hers, mingled with rainwater, streaming down her forearms in diluted rivulets. The wound in his side continued to seep, darkening her already soaked jacket. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the road ahead for precious seconds. There, just beyond the next bend, she caught a glimpse of a wooden sign nearly obscured by overgrown pines. Claire's retreat. Thank God, Elena breathed. The narrow dirt driveway felt endless as she lurched up the gradual incline. Her aunt's cabin materialized through the downpour, a sturdy A-frame with a wide porch and dark windows. Not the luxury retreat many sought in these mountains, but tonight it looked like salvation. As she reached the porch steps, her legs finally betrayed her. Elena stumbled, nearly dropping her burden. The wolf stirred then, a low rumble vibrating against her chest. Those golden eyes opened, fixing on her face with that same unnerving awareness. Almost there, she told it, feeling half mad for speaking to a wild animal as if it understood. Yet something in its gaze made her certain that it did. The porch offered momentary shelter from the deluge. Elena propped the wolf against the wall while she fumbled for the key her aunt had hidden beneath a false rock. Her fingers trembled so violently she nearly dropped it twice before managing to unlock the door. Getting the massive wolf inside was another feat entirely. He seemed to gather what strength remained, dragging himself across the threshold with Elena supporting his weight as best she could. Once inside, she kicked the door shut behind them, plunging them into darkness broken only by flashes of lightning through the windows. Power, she muttered, staggering to the wall where she remembered a light switch. Nothing happened when she flipped it. Of course, the storm must have knocked out the electricity. She fumbled through her pocket for her phone, switching on its flashlight. The beam caught dust motes dancing in the air and illuminated the rustic interior. A stone fireplace, worn but comfortable furniture, a small kitchenette, and a staircase leading to the loft bedroom. The wolf had collapsed onto the braided rug before the fireplace, its massive chest heaving with labored breaths. In the harsh light of her phone, Elena could better see the wound. What looked like an arrow or bolt protruded from its side, the shaft broken off, leaving just inches visible among the matted fur. "Someone shot you," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Who hunts wolves around here?" Not that wolves this size should exist at all. Logic screamed at her to back away, to lock herself in another room until morning or help arrived. This was a wild, wounded animal capable of tearing out her throat without effort. But the same inexplicable certainty that had compelled her to carry him here kept her rooted beside him now. "I need to get that out," she said, reaching tentatively toward the broken shaft. The wolf's eyes tracked her movement, but he made no attempt to snap at her hand. Instead, he held perfectly still, as if understanding her intent. Elena had taken a wilderness first aid course years ago when she'd gone through her brief outdoorsy phase. She'd never imagined using those skills on a wolf, but the principles should be similar. First, she needed supplies. "Don't move," she told the wolf, feeling ridiculous even as the words left her mouth. She found candles in a kitchen drawer and lit several, placing them around the room. The warm glow revealed a first aid kit mounted on the wall, thankfully well stocked. She grabbed towels from the bathroom, filled a bowl with water, and returned to her patient. The wolf watched her every move, its gaze unnervingly intelligent. When she knelt beside it again, it shifted slightly, positioning its wounded side more accessibly. "This is going to hurt," she warned, placing one hand firmly on its shoulder. "But that thing needs to come out." The moment her fingers closed around the broken shaft, something strange happened. A tremor passed through the wolf's body, not pain, but something else. The air in the cabin seemed to thicken, charged like the atmosphere before lightning strikes. The wolf's eyes locked onto hers, and that same impossible sensation from earlier returned, a connection, a recognition that defied explanation. It felt like something tugging deep in her chest, binding them together. Then she pulled. The shaft slid free with sickening resistance. The wolf made no sound, though its powerful body tensed beneath her hand. Dark blood welled from the wound, soaking into the already matted fur. Elena pressed a clean towel against it, surprised at how steady her hands had become. "Good boy," she murmured, the words feeling absurdly inadequate. "We need to clean this now." As she worked, the storm's fury increased outside. Wind howled around the cabin's eaves, and thunder shook the windows in their frames. But the howls she'd heard earlier on the road seemed to have faded, or perhaps they were simply drowned out by the tempest. The wolf remained unnaturally still under her ministrations, only the occasional tremor and the steady rise and fall of its rib cage confirming it was alive. By the time Elena had cleaned and bandaged the wound as best she could, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical presence. "I don't know what else to do for you," she admitted, sitting back on her heels. "I'm not a vet. I'm not even sure what you are." The wolf's eyes had never left her face. Now, as if in response to her words, it shifted. With obvious effort, it raised its massive head and moved it forward, slowly, deliberately, until its muzzle pressed gently against her hand. The gesture was so unmistakably one of gratitude that Elena's breath caught. This was no ordinary wolf. Nothing about this night was ordinary. "You're welcome," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Though I'm not sure I've helped you much." She should clean herself up, find dry clothes, treat the scratches on her arms where the wolf's claws had inadvertently caught her skin. But exhaustion pulled at her with irresistible force. She leaned back against the sofa behind her, meaning to rest just for a moment. "I'll figure this out in the morning," she murmured, her eyelids growing heavy. "When the storm passes." She drifted into uneasy sleep, her hand still resting lightly on the wolf's fur. Elena woke with a jolt. The storm had quieted to a gentle patter on the roof, and gray dawn light filtered through the windows. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why her body ached as though she'd run a marathon. Then memory flooded back. The crash, the injured wolf, her desperate trek through the storm. She sat up with a gasp, looking to where the massive animal had been lying. The wolf was gone. In its place, sprawled unconscious on the braided rug, lay a man. He was strikingly handsome in a wild, untamed way, tall and powerfully built, with copper skin and long black hair fanned across the floor. A tattoo of intricate knotwork spiraled around one muscular arm. He was naked except for her makeshift bandage, still wrapped around his torso where the wolf's wound had been. Elena's mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. It wasn't possible. People didn't turn into wolves. Wolves didn't turn into people. This was a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion, yet even as she tried to deny the evidence before her, the man's eyes snapped open. They were the same impossible amber gold as the wolf's. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then he spoke, his voice deep and rough, as if it hadn't been used in some time. "You should have left me on that road." Elena couldn't breathe. Her world had just tilted on its axis, everything she thought she knew about reality crumbling beneath her. What are you?" He pushed himself up on one elbow, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. His gaze never left her face, intense and searching. "My name is Keon, and you, Elena Carter, have just made yourself a target by helping me." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with her still damp clothes. "How do you know my name?" "I know more than that," he replied, his expression darkening. "I know you're sent now. So do they." He gestured toward the window, toward the mountains beyond, the pack that was hunting me. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Pack? You mean more like you?" A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Like me, but not with me. Not anymore." He tried to stand, but faltered, one hand going to his injured side. "We need to move." "It's not safe here." "Not safe?" Elena echoed, finding her voice at last. "Nothing about this is safe. You were a wolf! And now you're—" She gestured wildly at him. "This isn't possible." "Believe what you want," Keon growled, forcing himself to his feet with visible effort. "But when they pick up our trail, and they will, they'll kill us both." A distant howl floated through the trees, so faint she might have imagined it. But the way Keon's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing, told her it was very real. "Why would they want to kill me?" she demanded, standing now too, keeping the sofa between them. "I haven't done anything." His golden gaze returned to her, something like regret flickering across his features. "You helped me. Worse, you touched my blood and I touched yours." He gestured to the scratches on her arms. "For my kind, that creates a bond. They'll smell it on you." Another howl rose from the forest, closer this time. Others joined it, a chorus that made the hair on Elena's arm stand on end. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying," Keon replied grimly, "that by saving my life, you've tied your fate to mine. And my fate isn't something anyone should share, especially not a human." "Human?" Elena echoed, the word hanging in the air between them. "As opposed to what exactly?" Keon's golden eyes narrowed. He moved with surprising grace for a wounded man, crossing to the window and peering through the curtains at the forest beyond. The storm had settled into a steady rain, gray morning light filtering weakly through the clouds. "We don't have time for this," he said, his voice tight with tension. "They're coming." "No." Elena planted herself firmly, arms crossed over her chest despite the tremor running through her body. "You don't get to show up as a wolf, turn into a man on my aunt's rug, and then start giving orders. I want answers, now." Keon turned from the window, frustration evident in the hard line of his jaw. For the first time, Elena fully registered his nakedness. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. "Clothes," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the stairs. "There might be something in my uncle's old things. Then we talk." Something like respect flickered across his features. He nodded once, then winced, his hand going to the bandaged wound at his side. "Second door on the left," Elena added, looking pointedly away. "I'll make coffee." While Keon dressed upstairs, she busied herself in the kitchen, grateful to discover the cabin had a gas stove that didn't require electricity. Her hands shook as she filled the kettle and searched for the instant coffee she'd seen in the pantry. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and questions that made her dizzy. A wolf had become a man, a man who spoke of packs hunting them, of blood bonds and humans as if they were a separate category from himself. "This isn't happening," she whispered, pressing her palms against the counter. "I'm having a mental breakdown. Or I hit my head in the crash and I'm hallucinating." "You're not hallucinating," Kian said from behind her. Elena startled, nearly knocking over the mug she'd set out. She hadn't heard him descend the stairs. He'd found a flannel shirt that stretched tight across his broad shoulders and a pair of jeans that stopped an inch above his ankles. The clothes belonged to her uncle, a man of average build. Kian made them look like they'd shrunk in the wash. Despite the ill fit, he carried himself with a primal dignity that seemed to fill the small kitchen. "How did you know my name?" she asked, needing somewhere concrete to start. Kian accepted the mug of coffee she offered, cradling it in large, scarred hands. "I heard you say it when you were on your phone earlier before the crash. You left a message for someone named Claire." Elena recalled the voicemail she'd left for her aunt, letting her know she was on her way. That made sense, at least. A relief amid the impossibilities. "And what about—" She gestured vaguely at him. "The wolf thing?" He took a long sip of coffee before answering, his golden eyes never leaving her face. "I'm a shifter. We're born this way, with the ability to take wolf form. We?" Elena sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "There are more of you?" "Many more. We live in packs, just like natural wolves." A shadow crossed his face. "Most of us, anyway." Another howl drifted through the trees outside, closer than before. Kian's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body tensing. "That's them, isn't it?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ones who shot you?" "Yes." He set down his coffee and moved to the window again, scanning the tree line. "The Black Pine Pack." "My former pack." "Former? They tried to kill you, why?" Kian's laugh was sharp and without humor. "Because I challenged the Alpha. Because I refused to follow orders I knew were wrong." He turned back to her, his expression grim. "Because I know things they don't want known." Elena tried to process this information, to fit it into some kind of framework that made sense. Shifters, packs, alphas. It sounded like a fantasy novel. "Not reality. Why should I believe any of this?" she asked, though the evidence of her own eyes was difficult to deny. "You saw what I am. I saw something impossible." Kian moved toward her then, his movements fluid despite his injury. He crouched before her chair, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could see flecks of amber in the gold of his eyes, the slight elongation of his canines when he spoke. "Your heart is racing," he said softly. "I can hear it. I can smell the adrenaline in your blood, the coffee on your breath, the rain in your hair. I can sense your fear, your confusion." He held up his hand, and as she watched, the nails lengthened into claws, sharp and deadly. "This is what I am. Not impossible. Just hidden." Elena swallowed hard, unable to look away from the transformation. "Change it back," she whispered. The claws receded, becoming human nails once more. Kian withdrew his hand but remained close, his gaze intense. "I need your help, Elena Carter, and whether you like it or not, you need mine. Because they're hunting you. Because they're hunting us both now." He stood, pacing the small kitchen. "When you carried me from that road, when your blood mixed with mine, you created a bond they can track. They'll smell it on you. To them, you're either my ally or my mate. Either way, a threat. Your mate?" Elena nearly choked on the word. "That's ridiculous. I don't even know you." "It doesn't matter what you know or don't know. What matters is what they believe." Kian paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Our kind. We're guided by instinct as much as reason. Blood calls to blood. When a shifter's blood mingles with another's, it creates a connection. When it's a human's blood, it's even more potent. It changes the scent." Elena unconsciously touched the scratches on her arms where his claws had caught her during the desperate journey to the cabin. "So they think I'm what exactly? Your girlfriend? They think you're mine." The simplicity of his statement hung in the air between them. "And in their eyes, that makes you as much an enemy as I am." The implications slowly sank in. "You're saying I can't just walk away from this? That they'll come after me even if I never see you again?" Kian's expression softened fractionally. "I'm sorry. I didn't ask for you to help me last night, but you did. And now we're both paying the price. Anger flared in her chest, hot and sudden. So I should have left you to die on the road? Is that it? Most humans would have. Well, I'm not most humans, Elena snapped, rising from her chair. And I don't appreciate being punished for having a conscience. A hint of a smile touched Kian's lips. No, you're not like most humans. That's becoming increasingly clear. Another howl cut through their conversation, this one alarmingly close. Kian's smile vanished. They've picked up our trail. We need to move. Move where? My car's wrecked, and in case you haven't noticed, we're miles from anywhere. Elena gestured around the small cabin. And what about... She broke off, a sudden realization hitting her. Oh God, Aunt Claire, she's supposed to join me here tomorrow. If these shifters are coming here, she'll be in danger, Kian finished for her. Call her. Tell her not to come. Elena frantically searched her pockets for her phone, then remembered it was still in her jacket, the one soaked with rain and blood, now draped over a chair near the fireplace. She retrieved it, praying it still worked. The screen lit up, but the signal showed only one weak bar. She dialed her aunt's number anyway, listening to it ring once, twice before cutting to voicemail. Claire, it's Elena. There's been a situation at the cabin. Nothing to worry about, but please don't come up tomorrow as planned. I'll call you again when I can explain better. She hesitated, then added, I'm okay, I promise. Just stay away for now. She ended the call, hoping it had gone through despite the weak signal. When she looked up, Kian was watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked defensively. You didn't tell her the truth. That werewolves are hunting us? Yeah, I left that part out. Shifters, he corrected. Werewolves are a myth. Despite everything, Elena laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Oh, excuse me. Shifters are totally different from werewolves. Obviously. To her surprise, Kian's lips quirked upward. Actually, they are. Werewolves are humans cursed to transform with the full moon, without control or consciousness. We're born shifters. We change at will and we keep our minds in wolf form. Is that why you understood me? On the road, he nodded. I was fully aware, just in another body. Elena sank back into her chair, trying to absorb this new reality. And your pack, they shot you because you challenged their leader? Kian's expression darkened. It's more complicated than that. The Black Pine Pack has been changing, becoming something our ancestors wouldn't recognize. The current alpha, Vex, has been breaking ancient laws, crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. What kind of lines? Before he could answer, a sound outside made them both freeze. The crunch of footsteps on the gravel driveway. Kian moved to the window with predatory speed, his body coiled with tension. They've found us, he whispered. 3 of them approaching from the east. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What do we do? Kian turned to her, his golden eyes gleaming with a fierce light. Do you trust me? I barely know you, she countered. But you saved my life. Instinct told you I was worth saving. He held out his hand. Trust that instinct again. Elena looked at his outstretched hand, scarred, strong, inhuman, in ways she was only beginning to understand. Everything in her rational mind screamed to run, to hide, to call for help. But beneath that, something deeper, more primal, recognized the truth in his words. Her instincts had led her to him for a reason. Outside, a low growl drifted through the morning air. Time had run out. Elena took his hand. We need to run, Kian said, his fingers tightening around hers. The back of the cabin, is there another exit? Elena nodded, trying to control her racing pulse. Through the utility room. There's a door that leads to a hiking trail. Perfect. He released her hand, moving with fluid grace despite his injury. Grab whatever you need, but be quick. We have minutes, not hours. The reality of their situation hit Elena like a physical blow. She was about to flee her safe haven with a man who had been a wolf just hours ago, pursued by others who could also shift between human and animal form. It was madness, and yet the growls outside were undeniably real. She rushed to gather essentials, her backpack, a flashlight, the first aid kit, a water bottle, her wallet. She changed quickly into dry clothes, layering against the mountain chill, jeans, hiking boots, flannel shirt, and her aunt's spare jacket, which was thankfully waterproof. When she returned to the main room, Kian had found a hunting knife in a drawer and was slipping it into his belt. The casual way he handled the blade spoke of familiarity with weapons. Food, he reminded her, nodding toward the kitchen. We might be in the woods for days. Days. The word sent a chill through her. Where are we even going? Away from here first, then north. His expression was grim. There's someone who might help us, but she's not easy to find. Elena didn't have time to ask who she was. Outside, a wolf howled. Much closer now, perhaps at the edge of the clearing surrounding the cabin. Kian's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body tensing. They're surrounding us, he murmured. 3 wolves moving into position. Elena grabbed granola bars, dried fruit, and beef jerky from the pantry, stuffing them into her backpack. Can you shift again? Run faster as a wolf? Kian shook his head. Not yet. The wound weakened me. Shifting twice in such a short time would be dangerous. He met her gaze steadily. I can still outrun them as a man. The question is, can you? The doubt in his voice stung her pride. I used to run track. I can hold my own. A hint of surprise, perhaps even respect, flashed across his features. Good. Because once we're out that door, we don't stop until we reach the ridge line. He glanced out the window again. They're waiting for their alpha. If we move now, we might have a chance. Elena slung her backpack over her shoulders, tightening the straps. Lead the way. Kian moved silently to the utility room door, Elena close behind. He paused with his hand on the knob, head tilted as if listening for something beyond human hearing. When I open this, he whispered, we run straight for the trees. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Follow me and match my pace as best you can. Elena nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpening her senses. She could smell the pine scent of Kian's borrowed clothes, hear the soft patter of rain on the roof, feel her own heartbeat pulsing in her fingertips. Kian counted down silently. 3, 2, 1, and threw open the door. They burst into the gray morning light, feet pounding across the wet grass toward the tree line. The forest loomed before them, dark and dense. Behind them, howls erupted. Their escape had been spotted. Elena pushed herself harder than she had in years, lungs burning as she kept pace with Kian. His longer stride should have left her behind, but he matched his speed to hers, staying close enough to grab her if needed. They hit the trees at full sprint, the forest closing around them like a protective embrace. The trail was narrow but clear, winding upward through dense pines. Rain dripped from branches overhead, pattering on leaves and soaking into the earth. Keep moving, Kian urged when she began to slow, his voice barely winded despite their pace. They're following. Elena couldn't hear their pursuers, but she took his word for it. She pushed through the growing burn in her legs, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. Up and up they climbed, the trail becoming steeper, rockier. After what felt like an eternity, Kian suddenly veered off the path, cutting sharply to the right through a tangle of underbrush. Elena followed without question, ducking beneath low-hanging branches, her boots slipping occasionally on wet leaves. They emerged into a small clearing, dominated by a massive fallen tree. Its upturned roots created a natural barrier nearly 10 feet high, the trunk stretching away into the forest like a wooden wall. Here, Kian said, pulling her toward the root system. There's a space beneath. Sure enough, erosion had carved a hollow beneath the root mass, creating a hiding place just large enough for 2 people to squeeze into. Elena hesitated only briefly before dropping to her knees and crawling inside. Kian followed, his larger frame barely fitting through the opening. The space smelled of damp earth and decay, but it was dry and well hidden. Outside, rain continued to fall softly through the canopy. Why are we stopping? Elena whispered, her breath coming in short gasps. I thought we needed to reach the ridge. We do, Kian replied, his golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. But first, we need to throw them off our trail. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth, a piece torn from the bandage she'd used on his wound. It was still stained with his blood. What are you— Shh. He pressed a finger to his lips, then leaned closer to whisper directly into her ear. They track by scent. We need to split their forces. With movements too quick for her to follow, he slipped back out of their hiding place. She heard him moving away through the underbrush, then silence. Minutes later, he returned, sliding back into their shelter. I hung pieces of the bandage on branches heading west, he explained quietly. With luck, at least some of them will follow that false trail. Elena stared at him, impressed despite herself. You've done this before, evaded pursuit? Yes. A shadow crossed his face. I've been running from them for months. She wanted to ask why. What could have happened to turn his own pack against him? But the sound of movement in the forest silenced her. Kian's arm shot out, pulling her deeper into the shadows of their hiding place. 3 wolves emerged from the trees, their silver-gray coats slick with rain. They were smaller than Kian had been in wolf form, but still massive compared to any natural wolf Elena had ever seen. They moved with eerie coordination, noses to the ground, following the trail she and Kian had left. The largest of the 3 paused directly in front of their hiding place, raising its head to sniff the air. Elena held her breath, certain it would detect them. Beside her, she felt Kian's muscles coil, his hand moving silently toward the knife at his belt. For a heart-stopping moment, the wolf's amber eyes seemed to stare directly at their hiding spot. Then another wolf howled from somewhere to the west, where Kian had planted his false trail. The lead wolf's ears pricked up, and with a silent signal to its companions, they melted back into the forest. Heading toward the sound, Elena released her breath in a shuddering sigh. That was too close, she whispered, when she was certain they were gone. It's not over, Kian replied grimly. That was just the advanced scouting party. The main pack won't be far behind, including Vex, and he won't be so easily fooled. Vex, the alpha you challenged? Kian nodded, his expression darkening. My former alpha, my former friend, and now the most dangerous enemy either of us could have. Elena shifted in the cramped space, trying to ease the tension in her muscles. You still haven't told me why they're hunting you. What did you do that was so terrible? For a long moment, Kian was silent, his golden eyes fixed on some distant point beyond their shelter. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, weighted with something like grief. I discovered something I wasn't meant to know. About our origins, about what we truly are. He turned to look at her, his gaze intense. The Black Pine Pack has always followed the old ways, the old beliefs. We were taught that shifters are descendants of ancient wolf spirits, blessed with dual nature, bound to protect the natural order. And that's not true? No, the truth is much more complicated and much more dangerous. Especially for humans. He hesitated. There's a reason shifters and humans have remained separate for centuries. There's a reason we hide what we are. A chill ran down Elena's spine that had nothing to do with their damp surroundings. What reason? Before Kian could answer, a new howl split the air, deeper, more powerful than the others. It resonated through the forest like a physical force, making the hairs on Elena's arms stand on end. Beside her, Kian went rigid. Vex, he whispered, and for the first time since she'd met him, Elena heard genuine fear in his voice. Can he track us here? Eventually, Kian's jaw tightened. We need to move again, reach higher ground. The ridge has caves. We can shelter there until nightfall. And then? Then we find the Keeper. She's our only hope of staying alive long enough for me to finish what I started. Elena wanted to ask more, to understand what she'd become entangled in, but Kian was already moving toward the opening of their hiding place, scanning the forest with preternatural focus. It's clear for now, he said, extending his hand to her. Are you ready to run again? Elena took his hand, her decision already made the moment she'd pulled him from that rain-soaked road. Ready. As they emerged from their shelter and set off deeper into the forest, the alpha's howl echoed behind them, a promise of pursuit that would not end until one side or the other was defeated. And Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was running not just for her life, but toward a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about the world. The forest grew denser as they climbed higher, ancient pines giving way to twisted junipers that clung to the increasingly rocky terrain. Elena's muscles burned with each upward step, her breath coming in sharp gasps as the air thinned. They had been moving steadily for hours, pausing only briefly to drink from a clear mountain stream or to listen for sounds of pursuit. Kian moved with the silent grace of a predator, despite his injury. Every few minutes he would stop, head tilted as he scented the air or listened to sounds beyond human perception. Each time his expression grew more grim. "They're still following," he said during one such pause. "Not as close as before, but they haven't given up." Elena leaned against a boulder, trying to catch her breath. "How much farther to these caves?" "Another hour, maybe less." Kian's golden eyes swept over her with concern. "Can you make it?" Pride made her straighten despite her exhaustion. "I'll make it." A hint of approval flickered across his face. "Most humans would have collapsed miles ago. Lucky for you, I'm stubborn." She took a long drink from her water bottle. "So, are you going to tell me about this keeper we're supposedly finding? Or why your former alpha wants you dead badly enough to track us across a mountain?" Kian's expression closed off, that now familiar guardedness returning to his features. But after a moment, he seemed to make a decision. "The keeper is not exactly one of us, not exactly human either. She guards the old knowledge, the true history of shifter kind." He glanced away toward the distant peaks. "And Vex hunts me because I stole something from the pack, something sacred." Elena waited for him to elaborate, but he remained silent, scanning the forest behind them. "That's it?" she finally asked. "That's all the explanation I get?" "I'm risking my life here, Kian. I deserve to know why." His jaw tightened. "Knowing too much is what put you in danger in the first place." "I'm pretty sure helping an injured wolf is what put me in danger," she countered. "And that was my choice. This," she gestured between them, "is also my choice. But I can't make informed choices if you keep me in the dark." Kian studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. Finally, he sighed and reached into his shirt, pulling out a leather cord that hung around his neck. Dangling from it was what appeared to be a smooth river stone, deep green with threads of gold running through it. "This is what Vex wants," he said, letting the stone rest in his palm. "The heart of Fenrir." Elena peered at it curiously. It seemed unremarkable beyond its unusual coloring, certainly nothing worth killing over. "What is it?" "According to pack legend, it's a piece of the first shifter's heart, crystallized when he died. It's been passed down through generations of alphas, used in the ascension ritual when leadership changes hands." Kian closed his fingers around the stone. "But that's not what it really is." A distant howl interrupted their conversation. Kian's head snapped up, his entire body tensing. "They're closer than I thought," he muttered. "We need to move, now!" They resumed their climb, faster now despite Elena's fatigue. The trail grew steeper, in places becoming little more than a rocky scramble that required both hands and feet to navigate. Kian stayed close, occasionally reaching back to steady her when loose shale threatened her footing. "So what is it really?" Elena asked when they paused at a particularly challenging section, her curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "The stone?" Kian glanced back at her, surprise evident in his expression, as if he hadn't expected her to pursue the conversation. "It's a key," he said finally, "to knowledge that was hidden centuries ago. Knowledge about what we truly are, and why the division between humans and shifters exists. And this keeper has the answers, if anyone does." He helped her over a fallen log that blocked their path. "The keepers have preserved the true histories since before written language. They're neutral, not aligned with any pack or human faction." Elena processed this as they continued upward. The clouds had begun to break, allowing intermittent sunlight to filter through the trees. In another context, the view would have been breathtaking. Rolling mountains stretching to the horizon, valleys carpeted in vibrant spring green. "Why is this knowledge so dangerous that Vex would kill to keep it hidden?" she asked. Kian was silent for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reverent. "Because it threatens the foundation of shifter society. The hierarchy, the bloodlines, the separation from humans. All of it is built on lies." He glanced back at her, his golden eyes intense. "Did you ever wonder why shifters exist at all? Why some people can transform into animals while others cannot. I didn't know shifters existed until last night, Elena reminded him. A brief smile touched his lips. Fair point. But most shifters don't question it either. We're taught that we're blessed by nature, chosen to protect the balance between worlds. His expression darkened. The truth is far less romantic, and far more complicated. Another howl echoed through the mountains, closer than before. Kian cursed under his breath. We need to hurry, he said, quickening his pace. The ridge is just ahead. They emerged from the tree line onto a narrow ledge that skirted the mountain face. Below them, the forest spread like a green sea. Above, sheer rock rose another 100 feet to the ridge line. A precarious path hugged the cliff face, barely wide enough for single-file travel. That's our route, Kian said, pointing to the path. The caves are just beyond that outcropping. Elena eyed the narrow trail with trepidation. One misstep would mean a fall of several 100 feet. There's no other way? Not unless you want to face a pack of angry shifters. Kian held out his hand. I won't let you fall. Something in his voice made her believe him. She took his hand, noting how warm his skin was against hers, almost feverishly hot, as if his body burned fuel at a different rate than a human's. They began the treacherous traverse, moving slowly, backs pressed against the rock face. The wind had picked up, tugging at their clothes and hair, threatening their balance with each gust. Elena focused on placing one foot precisely in front of the other, trying not to look down at the dizzying drop beside her. They had covered perhaps half the distance when a rock clattered down from above. Kian froze, pulling Elena close against the cliff wall. Don't move, he whispered, his body suddenly tense as a drawn bow. Elena followed his gaze upward. Standing on the ridge above them was a massive silver-gray wolf, its amber eyes fixed on them with cold intelligence. Even from this distance, she could see it was larger than the scouts they'd evaded earlier, nearly as large as Kian had been in wolf form. Vex, Kian breathed, his voice barely audible over the wind. The alpha wolf tilted its head, studying them with an almost human contemplation. Then it threw back its head and loosed a howl that seemed to shake the very mountain. Answering calls rose from the forest below. Move, Kian urged, pushing Elena forward. Quickly but carefully. The cave entrance is just around that bend. They abandoned caution for speed, moving as fast as the narrow ledge allowed. Above them, the Alpha paced along the ridge, keeping pace with their progress. It made no attempt to descend to their level, but its presence was a constant threat, like the blade of a guillotine suspended overhead. The ledge widened slightly as they rounded the bend, revealing a dark opening in the cliff face, a cave entrance partially hidden by an outcropping of rock. Relief flooded Elena's exhausted body. That relief was short-lived. As they approached the cave, a snarl echoed from within. A wolf emerged from the shadows, smaller than Vex, with russet fur and a white blaze on its chest. It blocked their path, teeth bared in challenge. Lyra, Kian said, his voice a mixture of surprise and resignation. I should have known Vex would send you ahead. To Elena's shock, the wolf's form began to shift, bones cracking, fur receding, limbs elongating until a woman stood before them. She was strikingly beautiful, with auburn hair and the same amber eyes she'd had in wolf form. Like Kian, after his transformation, she was naked, but seemed entirely untroubled by this fact. Hello, brother, she said, her voice carrying the same feral undertone as Kian's. Did you really think you could outrun us forever? Elena's gaze darted between them. Brother? Not by blood, Kian replied, positioning himself slightly in front of Elena. By pack. Lyra's gaze shifted to Elena, her nostrils flaring slightly as she scented the air. So this is your human, the one whose blood you've mingled with. Her lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. Vex will be pleased. 2 traitors for the price of 1. She's innocent in this, Lyra, Kian said. Let her go. Your quarrel is with me. Innocent? Lyra laughed, the sound echoing off the cliff face. She carries your scent, Kian. She helped you escape. And now she knows what we are. She shook her head. There's no going back for her. Surely you understand that. Above them, Vex growled, the sound rolling like thunder down the mountainside. Lyra glanced up at her alpha, then back to Keon. "He wants the heart," she said. "Give it to me, and perhaps your deaths will be quick." Keon's hand moved to the stone hanging at his neck. "You don't understand what this really is, Lyra. None of you do. If you did, you'd be helping me, not hunting me. I understand that you stole from our alpha, that you challenged him and lost, then fled like a coward instead of accepting your fate." Lyra's expression hardened. "The old ways are clear, Keon. A defeated challenger dies or submits. You chose neither." "The old ways are built on lies," Keon replied, his voice rising with conviction. "Everything we believe about ourselves, about our purpose, all of it fabricated to control us." "Heresy," Lyra spat. "Is this what you've been filling your human's head with? No wonder Vex wants her dead too." Elena had been silent during this exchange, mind racing as she assessed their options. They were trapped, Vex above, Lyra blocking the cave entrance, and undoubtedly more wolves climbing up from below. But something Lyra had said gave her an idea. "Your alpha," Elena said suddenly, drawing both shifters' attention. "He wants the stone, right? Not necessarily us." Lyra's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "The human speaks." "Yes, the heart of Fenrir is what matters most." Elena turned to Keon. "Give it to them." "What?" Keon stared at her in disbelief. "Elena, you don't understand." "I understand that we're cornered, and that stone is our only bargaining chip." She held his gaze steadily, willing him to trust her. "Give them what they want." For a moment, Keon looked as if he might refuse. Then, with a resigned nod, he reached up and removed the leather cord from around his neck. The green stone dangled from his fingers, catching the sunlight and sending emerald reflections dancing across the rock face. Lyra's eyes gleamed with triumph. "A wise choice, brother." She extended her hand. "Now toss it to me and we can end this chase." Keon hesitated, his jaw tight with tension. Then with a flick of his wrist, he sent the stone arcing through the air, not toward Lyra, but out over the cliff edge. "No!" Lyra lunged forward, reaching desperately for the stone as it sailed past her. In that moment of distraction, Elena grabbed Keon's arm and pulled him toward the unguarded cave entrance. They plunged into the darkness as Lyra's enraged howl echoed behind them. "Are you insane?" Keon demanded as they ran deeper into the cave. "That stone was still around your neck," Elena finished for him, pointing to the leather cord still visible beneath his shirt. "I saw you palm something else, a pebble, I'm guessing." Keon stared at her for a moment, then laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and admiration. "You're something else, Elena Carter." "I dated a magician in college," she explained, allowing herself a small smile despite their dire situation. "I know a sleight of hand when I see one." Their moment of triumph was short-lived. From the cave entrance came the sound of claws on stone and deep rumbling growls. The pack was converging on their position. "This way," Keon said, taking her hand and leading her deeper into the darkness. "These caves connect to a whole system. If we can reach the central chamber, there's another exit on the far side of the mountain." As they moved deeper into the earth, leaving the howls of their pursuers behind, Elena couldn't help but wonder what she'd gotten herself into, and whether they would live long enough to find the answers Keon sought. The deeper they ventured into the mountain, the more the cave changed around them. What had begun as rough natural passageways gradually transformed into something that made Elena's skin prickle with unease. The walls became smoother, more regular, with occasional markings that looked unsettlingly like deliberate carvings. "These aren't natural caves," she whispered, running her fingers along a series of spiral symbols etched into the stone. "No," Keon confirmed, his voice equally hushed. The beam from Elena's flashlight caught his profile, throwing sharp shadows across his face. They were shaped by the first shifters centuries ago. This entire mountain is sacred ground, or was, before most forgot its significance. The howls of their pursuers had faded behind them, though occasional echoes still reached their ears, distorted by the twisting passages. The fact that the pack hadn't immediately overtaken them suggested they were being cautious, perhaps even fearful of these ancient tunnels. "Why haven't they followed us?" Elena asked, pausing to catch her breath in a wider chamber. The flashlight's beam couldn't reach the ceiling, giving the unsettling impression that the darkness above them stretched forever. Kian's eyes gleamed in the dim light, reflective like a wolf's. These passages are forbidden to most pack members. Only alphas and those they specifically permit may enter. His expression darkened. Vex will follow eventually. He won't be deterred by old taboos. But you're not afraid to be here. I stopped fearing pack laws when I discovered they were built on lies. He moved to the center of the chamber, where a circular depression in the floor contained what appeared to be ancient ash. This is an old fire pit. We can rest here briefly. Elena sank gratefully to the ground, her legs trembling with exhaustion. They had been moving for hours, first up the mountain and then through these labyrinthine caves. Adrenaline had carried her this far, but her body was reaching its limits. Kian noticed her fatigue and, without comment, pulled some of the jerky and dried fruit from her backpack, offering it to her first. The simple gesture of consideration touched her unexpectedly. "Thank you," she said, accepting the food. "Not just for this, for everything. You could have left me behind when they started tracking us." His golden eyes studied her with that unnerving intensity that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. "You saved my life. I don't abandon debts. Is that all this is? A debt?" The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Kian was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the shadowy light. "No," he finally said, his voice lower, rougher. "Not just a debt." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Elena looked away first, focusing on the strange symbols carved into the chamber walls. "What do these markings mean?" she asked, deliberately changing the subject. Kian followed her gaze, seeming almost relieved by the shift in conversation. "They're the old language, a script used before shifters adopted human writing systems. Most can't read it anymore." He moved to one wall, tracing the deep-cut symbols with his fingertips. "This section speaks of the first change, the origin story all shifters are taught as cubs. And what story is that? That our ancestors were wolves blessed by ancient spirits, given human form as a gift so they could serve as guardians between the animal and human worlds." His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "A beautiful myth, but a myth nonetheless." Elena studied him in the dim light. "And the truth? Is that what the stone, the heart of Fenrir, reveals?" Kian pulled the leather cord from beneath his shirt, letting the green stone rest in his palm. In the beam of the flashlight, it seemed to glow from within, the gold threads catching the light like trapped lightning. "The heart doesn't just reveal the truth, it proves it." He held it out to her. "Here, hold it." Elena hesitated before extending her hand. When the stone touched her palm, she gasped. It was warm, unnaturally so, as if it generated its own heat. But that wasn't what made her breath catch. As she held it, the gold threads within seemed to move, to pulse like living veins. "What is it?" she whispered, transfixed. "It's not stone," Kian said quietly. "It's technology. Ancient technology that predates human civilization as we understand it." Elena looked up sharply, certain he must be joking. His expression remained deadly serious. "That's impossible." "Is it more impossible than men who transform into wolves?" He gestured to the stone in her hand. "What you're holding is a data storage device. The gold threading is a type of circuitry we still don't fully understand. It contains information, historical records, genetic data, coordinates to places long buried or forgotten." Elena stared at the stone, the device in her palm. It continued to pulse warmly against her skin, as if recognizing her touch. "You're saying shifters aren't supernatural beings? That this is some kind of science?" Kian nodded slowly. "We're the result of deliberate genetic engineering, Elena. Not magic, not spiritual blessing. Science. Advanced science from a civilization that existed before recorded history." The implications were staggering. Elena felt as if the ground beneath her had suddenly shifted, leaving her unmoored in a world where nothing was as she had believed. "But why?" she asked, struggling to make sense of it. "Why would an ancient civilization create shapeshifters?" "Protection," Kian replied. "Or at least that's part of it. The records speak of threats, both from this world and beyond it, that humans alone couldn't face. Shifters were created as guardians, warriors with enhanced strength, senses, and the ability to adapt to different environments through transformation. Beyond this world? Elena echoed incredulously. Are you saying? A distant howl interrupted her question, echoing through the tunnels with renewed urgency. Kian tensed, taking the heart from her hand and returning it to its place around his neck. They're coming, he said grimly. Vex must have decided the old taboos aren't worth respecting after all. Elena rose quickly, wincing as her tired muscles protested. How much further to this central chamber you mentioned? Not far. Through that passage. He pointed to a tunnel entrance on the far side of the room, darker and narrower than the one they'd used to enter. It will lead us to the heart of the mountain. As they prepared to continue their journey, Elena paused, a thought suddenly occurring to her. If what you're saying is true, if shifters were created to protect humans, why are we running from them? Why does your pack want to kill us for knowing this? Kian's expression darkened. Because over thousands of years, the truth was twisted. What began as a sacred duty to protect became a belief in inherent superiority. Many shifters now see humans as lesser beings, to be controlled or avoided, not protected. He met her gaze directly. Vex and those like him believe that if this truth were known, it would destroy the hierarchy that keeps them in power. And you? What do you believe? He was silent for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting the flashlight's beam like banked flames. I believe that the division between our kinds has gone on too long, that we've forgotten our purpose, our connection. His voice softened. I believe the future depends on remembering what we once were to each other. The howls grew louder, more insistent. Multiple voices now, echoing through the stone passages like vengeful spirits. We need to go, Kian said, extending his hand to her. Elena took it without hesitation, her fingers intertwining with his. Whatever lay ahead, whatever ancient truths or dangers awaited them, they would face it together. The central chamber was unlike anything Elena could have imagined. Her flashlight beam seemed swallowed by the vast space, revealing only tantalizing glimpses of its true scale. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by columns that appeared to grow organically from the floor like massive stone trees. But what took her breath away were the walls. Every surface was covered in those same strange markings they'd seen in the tunnels. But here they formed intricate murals, scenes depicting beings that were neither fully human nor fully animal, engaged in what appeared to be battles against shadowy, distorted figures. What are we looking at? She whispered, her voice automatically hushing in the cathedral-like space. Our history, Kian replied, equally quiet. The true history of shifters and humans, fighting side by side against forces that threatened both. He guided her toward the center of the chamber, where a raised dais of smooth black stone dominated the space. In its center was a circular depression that seemed designed to hold something. This is why we came, Kian said, removing the heart from around his neck. This is where the truth can be revealed in full. Before he could place the stone in its apparent resting place, a voice rang out from the entrance they had just used. I wouldn't do that if I were you, brother. They turned to see Lyra standing at the edge of the chamber, her human form silhouetted against the darker tunnel beyond. She was dressed now, wearing what appeared to be clothes stashed somewhere in the caves, practical hiking gear that didn't quite fit her slender frame. How did you get ahead of us? Elena asked, instinctively stepping closer to Kian. Lyra smiled, the expression more predatory than friendly. I know these tunnels better than most. Vex has trusted me with certain privileges. The way she said it suggested her relationship with the Alpha was more intimate than simple pack hierarchy. Where is he? Kian asked, his posture tense, ready for attack. Coming, Lyra replied, along with the rest of the pack. But I thought perhaps you and I might resolve this before they arrive. She stepped further into the chamber, her amber eyes fixed on the stone in Kian's hand. You always were my favorite packmate, Kian. I don't want to see you torn apart. Then help us, Elena interjected, earning a sharp look from both shifters. If what Kian says is true, your entire society is based on a misunderstanding. Don't you want to know the truth? Lyra's gaze shifted to Elena, her head tilting in that distinctly canine gesture of curiosity. You speak boldly for a human. She moved closer, circling them with predatory grace. What has he told you, I wonder? That shifters and humans are meant to be equals? That we were created to serve you? To protect, Kian corrected. Not serve. There's a difference, is there? Lyra laughed bitterly. I've studied these markings too, brother. I've seen the records Vex keeps hidden from the rest of the pack. And yes, perhaps we were engineered by some ancient civilization, but that doesn't make us less. It makes us more. Her eyes gleamed with fervor. We are the next step in evolution, the perfect blend of human intellect and animal strength. Why should we bow to creatures who can't even track prey by scent? Elena felt a chill at the conviction in Lyra's voice. This wasn't simple ignorance. This was a deeply held belief in shifter supremacy. That's not what the records show, Kian argued. We were partners, allies, different but equal. Until humans forgot us, Lyra countered. Until they hunted us, forced us into hiding, treated us as monsters from their nightmares. She turned to Elena. Did you know your kind used to burn shifters alive? Called us demons, witches, abominations? For centuries we've had to hide what we are, while humans destroyed the very world we were meant to protect. Elena had no answer for that. The weight of a history she hadn't known existed pressed down on her, complicated and painful. The past has wrongs on both sides, Kian said quietly, but the future doesn't have to repeat them. He held up the heart. This contains knowledge that could heal the rift between our kinds. Show us a path forward together. Lyra's expression softened, a hint of the bond she and Kian once shared, showing through her hostility. Always the idealist. It's what I loved about you. She sighed, genuine regret coloring her tone. But Vex will never allow it. He believes humans are a threat to our very existence, and recent history hasn't proven him wrong. So you'll stand with him? Kian asked. Even knowing what you know? A shadow passed over Lyra's features. I stand with the pack, always. She extended her hand. Give me the heart, Kian, please. I can convince Vex to let your human go if you surrender now. And what about me? Lyra didn't answer, but her silence was reply enough. The distant sound of claws on stone echoed through the tunnels. The pack was drawing closer. Time had run out. Kian's hand closed around the heart, his decision clear in the set of his jaw. I'm sorry, Lyra, but some truths need to be revealed, no matter the cost. Before she could react, he stepped backward onto the dais and placed the green stone into the circular depression at its center. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The stone sank into the depression as if it had been designed for it, which Elena realized it had been. Golden light burst from the contact point, flowing outward along channels in the black stone that hadn't been visible before. The light raced across the floor of the chamber, up the columns, and finally spread across the walls, illuminating the ancient carvings with an ethereal glow. The entire chamber hummed with energy, the air itself seeming to vibrate with power long dormant, now awakened. Lyra staggered back, her eyes wide with shock and something like fear. What have you done? The answer came not from Kian, but from the chamber itself. The golden light coalesced in the center of the room, swirling upward into a column of luminescence. Within that column, images began to form, three-dimensional projections that shifted and flowed like living paintings. Elena watched, transfixed, as the history of shifters unfolded before her eyes. She saw humans and wolf-like beings working together to build great structures. She saw battles against creatures she couldn't identify. Some appeared almost reptilian, others shadowy and amorphous. She saw what could only be described as a great cataclysm, fire raining from the sky, the earth itself breaking apart. And through it all, humans and shifters stood together. Allies, defenders, friends. The images shifted again, showing the aftermath. Small groups of survivors scattered across a changed landscape. Knowledge lost, technologies forgotten. The slow, drift apart as fear and misunderstanding grew between the two peoples once so closely allied. When the light finally faded, the chamber seemed darker than before, the weight of forgotten history hanging in the air like smoke. "Now you understand," Kian said softly, his eyes fixed on Lyra's shocked face. "This is what Vex fears. The truth. That we were never meant to be separate, never meant to rule or be ruled." Lyra stood frozen, her world view visibly crumbling around her. But before she could respond, a deep growl emanated from the tunnel entrance. A massive silver wolf emerged from the darkness, flanked by several others. The Alpha had arrived, as they... Vex's burning amber eyes surveyed the chamber, taking in the still glowing markings, the activated dais, and the three figures at its center. Elena knew that the revelation they had just witnessed would not be accepted peacefully. The ancient truth was out, but the battle for its meaning had only just begun. Vex stalked into the chamber, his massive form rippling with barely contained fury. The silver wolf's eyes, amber like Kian's but colder, harder, fixed on the glowing dais with an intensity that made Elena step back involuntarily. Behind him, 4 more wolves spread out, effectively blocking the chamber's entrance. The Alpha paused, his gaze shifting from the activated stone to Kian, then to Lyra, who still stood frozen in shock. Something passed between them, a silent communication that Elena couldn't interpret but that made Lyra lower her head slightly. Then, with a fluidity that was both beautiful and terrifying, Vex began to shift. Elena had witnessed Kian's transformation in reverse, wolf to man, but watching a human form emerge from wolf was something else entirely. Bones elongated with audible cracks, fur receded into skin. The spine straightened, and the muzzle flattened into a human face. The entire process took less than 30 seconds, yet seemed to stretch into eternity. Where the silver wolf had stood now towered a man who could only be described as imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked black hair, and the same cold amber eyes. Like Lyra had been, he was naked, his body marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. Unlike Lyra, he made no move to find clothing, apparently unconcerned with his nudity. "You've gone too far this time, Kian," Vex said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in the stone beneath their feet. "Activating the shrine, exposing our secrets to a human." His gaze flicked dismissively to Elena. "Breaking the most sacred laws of our kind." "Laws built on lies," Kian replied evenly, though Elena could sense the tension coiled in his body. "You saw the truth just as we did. We were never meant to hide from humans, never meant to consider them lesser beings." Vex's laugh was harsh, without humor. "I've seen these records before, pup, many times. Every Alpha has. It's part of our burden to know the truth and still protect our people from it." The revelation seemed to catch Kian off guard. "You knew? All this time?" "Of course I knew." Vex approached the dais, his movements predatory despite his human form. "Why do you think the heart is passed only to Alphas? Why access to these caves is restricted?" He gestured to the still glowing markings on the walls. "Some truths are too dangerous to be widely known." "Only dangerous to your power," Kian challenged. "If the pack learned we were created to protect humans, not rule them, they would what?" Vex cut in. "Rush to serve a species that has hunted us for centuries? Abandon the safety we've built? Expose themselves to a world that would cage or kill them for being different?" His eyes narrowed. "Don't be naive. Humans fear what they don't understand, and they destroy what they fear." Elena found her voice then, stepping forward despite Kian's warning hand on her arm. "Not all of us." Vex's cold gaze settled on her, assessing and dismissive in a single glance. "Ah, the human speaks. Tell me, girl, if you saw a wolf in the forest tomorrow, would your first instinct be to approach it or avoid it?" "That's different," she protested. "Natural wolves are wild animals. They're not sentient, Not capable of reason? Vex finished for her. And yet when faced with Kian in wolf form, bleeding and vulnerable, you helped him. Why? The question caught Elena off guard. She hesitated, searching for an answer that made sense. His eyes, she finally said. There was something in them. Something human. Precisely. Vex nodded as if she'd proven his point. You recognize the humanity in him, not the wolf. Humans only value what reflects themselves. He turned back to Kian. This is why the separation must continue. Not because shifters are superior, but because humans aren't ready to accept what we are. A low growl rumbled from one of the wolves guarding the entrance. Vex raised a hand, silencing it without looking back. The pack grows restless, he said. This ends now. Return the heart, Kian, and accept your punishment. The human dies quickly, a mercy considering her crime. Elena's blood ran cold at the casual pronouncement of her death. Beside her, Kian's body tensed further, his stance shifting subtly into something more defensive. I won't let you harm her, he said, his voice dropping to a growl that was more wolf than human. Something flashed in Vex's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. So it's like that, is it? You've bonded with her. He inhaled deeply, scenting the air between them. More than just blood mingling. Interesting. What is he talking about? Elena whispered to Kian. Before he could answer, Lyra stepped forward, her expression troubled. Vex, I saw the records. What if Kian is right? What if our separation from humans has gone on too long? The Alpha's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing dangerously. You question me? After everything? Lyra stood her ground, though Elena could see the effort it cost her. I question whether we've been following the right path. These records show a partnership, not a hierarchy. What if... Her words cut off in a gasp as Vex moved with blinding speed, his hand closing around her throat. I expected this from him, he snarled, nodding toward Kian. Not from you. Let her go, Kian demanded, stepping forward. Your quarrel is with me. Vex released Lyra with a dismissive push that sent her stumbling back. My quarrel is with anyone who threatens the pack's survival. He turned his cold gaze back to Kian. Last chance. Return the heart and accept your fate. The tension in the chamber had reached a breaking point. The wolves at the entrance were growing visibly agitated, their muscles twitching beneath silver-gray fur, teeth bared in silent snarls. Elena's mind raced, searching for a solution that didn't end in bloodshed. The knowledge revealed by the heart had shaken Lyra's beliefs. Perhaps there was hope that others could be swayed as well. Wait, she said, stepping forward despite Kian's attempt to hold her back. What if there's a third option? Not separation, not immediate integration, but understanding. A beginning. Vex regarded her with thinly veiled contempt. You speak of things you cannot comprehend. Human. I'm trying to comprehend, she countered. I've seen the truth in these walls just as you have. Shifters and humans were allies once. They can be again. But not through force, not through fear. She gestured to the wolves blocking their exit. This, threatening, intimidating, it only proves the worst fears humans have about wolves. About you. Elena, Kian warned, but she pressed on. The records showed partnership, she continued, gathering courage. Respect on both sides. If that's what you truly want to protect, Vex, then start now, with me. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Even the wolves at the entrance had gone still, watching the confrontation with unsettling intelligence in their amber eyes. Finally, Vex spoke, his voice deceptively soft. You speak well for a human. Perhaps in another life, another time, your words might have merit. His expression hardened. But you forget something crucial about wolves, Elena Carter. What's that? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. We are predators at our core. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. And you have trespassed in our territory. What happened next unfolded so quickly that Elena could barely process it. Vex lunged toward her with inhuman speed, his hands already beginning to transform into claws. Simultaneously, Kian threw himself between them. His own partial shift happening in an instant, not a full transformation, but enough that his hands became clawed, his teeth elongated into fangs. The two shifters collided with bone-jarring force, locked together in a deadly embrace. Vex's greater size gave him advantage, but Kian fought with the desperation of someone protecting more than just himself. "Run!" Kian shouted to Elena, his voice distorted by his partially shifted form. "Take the heart and go." Elena hesitated, unwilling to leave him. Behind her, the wolves at the entrance had begun to advance, low growls echoing off the chamber walls. Lyra appeared at her side, grabbing her arm with surprising strength. "This way?" she urged, pulling Elena toward a narrow passage Elena hadn't noticed before. "There's another exit, but Kian can handle himself," Lyra finished. "The heart is what matters now. Vex will kill for it." The sounds of the fight behind them were terrifying. Snarls, the impact of bodies against stone, the crack of what might have been bone. Every instinct screamed at Elena to turn back, to help somehow, but logic told her Lyra was right. She was no match for a shifter, let alone an alpha. With a silent prayer that Kian would survive, she allowed Lyra to guide her toward the hidden passage. As they reached it, she glanced back one last time. The sight stopped her heart for a beat. Kian and Vex had both fully shifted now, two massive wolves locked in combat, one black as midnight, the other silver as moonlight. They fought with a savagery that was purely animal, yet with strategies that spoke of human intelligence. Blood darkened their fur where teeth had found purchase. But neither showed signs of yielding. The other pack members were circling the fight, maintaining the strange code of honor that prevented them from interfering in what was clearly a challenge between dominant males. "Now," Lyra hissed, pushing Elena into the passage. "Before they remember we're here." The passage was narrow, requiring them to move single file through near darkness. Elena's flashlight provided their only illumination, the beam bouncing erratically off the rough stone walls as they ran. "Why are you helping me?" Elena gasped when they paused at a fork in the tunnel. Lyra's amber eyes reflected the light like a cat's. "I'm not helping you. I'm helping him." She nodded back the way they had come. Kian was right about one thing. The separation has gone too far. I saw it in the records, felt the truth of it. She looked away, conflict evident in her expression. "And Vex is not the leader I thought he was." A distant howl echoed through the tunnels, a sound of pain that made Elena's blood run cold. Was that— "We need to keep moving," Lyra cut her off, choosing the left-hand path. "This way leads to the northern face of the mountain. There's a trail that will take you down to a ranger station about 5 miles from here." "I'm not leaving without Kian," Elena insisted, planting her feet. Lyra turned on her with a snarl, her face partially shifting in her frustration, muzzle elongating, teeth sharpening to points. "You don't understand what's happening. That fight back there isn't just about the heart or about you. It's a challenge for leadership of the pack. If Kian wins, he becomes alpha. If Vex wins—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "If Vex won, Kian would be dead. And the heart?" Elena asked, her hand going to the empty dais where the stone had been. Lyra's eyes widened. "You took it?" Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out the green stone, still warm to the touch, its gold threads pulsing gently against her palm. "I couldn't leave it for Vex." A look of amazement crossed Lyra's features. "It allowed you to touch it? A human? What do you mean allowed?" "The heart responds to intent," Lyra explained. "It can't be taken by force or with ill purpose. That's why Vex couldn't simply tear it from Kian's neck. It would have burned him." She stared at the stone in Elena's hand with newfound respect. "The fact that it accepts your touch means something." Another howl echoed through the tunnels, followed by the sounds of pursuit, claws on stone, the panting of wolves on the hunt. "They're coming," Lyra said, her head tilted in that distinctly canine way. "And they're not alone." "Vex?" Lyra nodded grimly. The challenge must have ended. "Either way, we need to move." They continued through the winding passages, the sounds of pursuit growing steadily closer. Elena's legs burned with exhaustion, her lungs struggling in the thin, dusty air of the tunnels. Only the thought of what awaited if they were caught kept her moving forward. Finally, they emerged onto a narrow ledge cut into the northern face of the mountain. The afternoon sun momentarily blinded Elena after so long in darkness. When her vision cleared, she saw they stood on a precipitous trail that hugged the cliff face, similar to the one they'd traversed earlier, but even narrower. "Follow this trail," Lyra instructed, pointing along the ledge. "It will take you down to a valley. The ranger station is there. You can't miss it. You're not coming?" Elena asked, surprised by the pang of concern she felt for the shifter woman who had been their enemy just hours ago. Lyra shook her head. "My place is with the pack, whatever happens next." She glanced back toward the cave entrance. "Besides, they'll be more focused on catching you if I stay to slow them down." The selflessness of the offer stunned Elena. "They'll know you helped me escape?" "Probably." A grim smile touched Lyra's lips. "But pack politics are complicated. My position offers some protection." The sounds of pursuit grew louder. They had only moments before the pack would reach the cave entrance. "Go," Lyra urged. "Keep the heart safe. And if Kian survived," she hesitated, "tell him I'm sorry. For everything." Before Elena could respond, Lyra turned and darted back into the tunnel, positioning herself to intercept their pursuers. Left alone on the mountainside, Elena clutched the heart of Fenrir tightly in her palm and began to make her way along the treacherous path. She had gone perhaps 50 yards when a commotion erupted from the cave entrance behind her. Risking a glance back, she saw wolves spilling out onto the ledge, 3, 4, then 5 of them. At their head was a silver wolf, its fur matted with blood but its posture unmistakably dominant. Vex had won the challenge, which meant Kian. Elena's heart constricted painfully in her chest. She couldn't finish the thought. Instead, she turned and moved as quickly as she dared along the narrow trail. The stone warm against her palm, its gold threads pulsing as if in time with her racing heartbeat. Behind her, the Alpha's howl echoed across the mountainside, a sound of triumph, of rage, of promised vengeance. The hunt was still on, and she was the prey. As the path curved around an outcropping of rock, temporarily shielding her from view, Elena made a desperate decision. The trail was too exposed. They would run her down long before she reached the valley. She needed another option. Her gaze fell on a dense stand of pines growing from a slope just below the trail. If she could reach those trees, perhaps she could lose herself in the forest. Use the terrain to her advantage against pursuers who relied primarily on scent. Taking a deep breath, Elena left the relative safety of the path and began to climb carefully down the steep slope toward the trees. Loose rocks skittered beneath her boots, threatening her balance with each step. One wrong move would send her tumbling hundreds of feet down the mountainside. She was halfway to the tree line when a shadow fell across her path. Looking up, she found herself staring into the amber eyes of a wolf, not silver like Vex, but russet-colored, with a white blaze on its chest. Lyra. The female shifter had circled around somehow, cutting off Elena's escape route. Behind her, the sounds of the pack grew closer. Vex's distinctive growl sending shivers down Elena's spine. Elena clutched the heart tighter, her mind racing through options that dwindled with each passing second. "I thought you were helping us," she said, the betrayal bitter on her tongue. To her surprise, Lyra shifted, a partial transformation that left her face mostly human but still wolf-like enough to speak. "I am helping," she growled. "But not this way. You'll never outrun them." "Then what?" "The heart," Lyra interrupted. "It's more than just a record keeper. The old stories say it can create passages, doorways between places. If you truly are bonded with it, if it truly accepts you." Elena looked down at the stone in her palm, its gold threads pulsing more rapidly now, almost urgently. "How? I don't know how to use it?" "Neither do I," Lyra admitted. "But I know it responds to need, to intention. Focus on safety, on escape." Her head snapped up, ears pivoting toward the sounds of approaching wolves. Quickly! They're almost here. With no better options, Elena closed her fingers around the stone and shut her eyes, focusing all her thoughts on safety, on escape, on finding somewhere beyond the reach of the vengeful pack. She thought of Kian, of his courage, his belief in a better future between their kinds. At first, nothing happened. The stone remained warm in her hand, pulsing steadily but otherwise inert. Then she felt it. A subtle shift in the air around her, a strange pulling sensation that seemed to originate from the stone itself. When she opened her eyes, she gasped in shock. The air before her had opened. There was no other way to describe it. A shimmering distortion, like heat waves rising from asphalt, formed a roughly circular passage about 6 feet in diameter. Through it, she could see trees, different from the pines on the mountainside, taller and more ancient-looking, bathed in soft golden light. "It worked," Lyra breathed, her expression a mixture of awe and vindication. The old stories were true. A furious howl cut through their amazement. Vex had spotted them. The silver wolf appeared on the trail above, blood-matted fur bristling as he assessed the situation below. Behind him, the rest of the pack emerged from around the bend. "Go," Lyra urged, already beginning to shift back to full wolf form. "I'll hold them as long as I can." "Come with me," Elena offered, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Lyra shook her head, the gesture oddly human despite her increasingly lupine features. "My place is here. The pack will need voices of reason in the days to come." With a final nod of understanding, Elena turned toward the shimmering portal. Taking a deep breath, she stepped through. The world shifted around her. A sensation of falling without moving, of being unmade and remade in the space between heartbeats. Colors blurred, sounds distorted, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, Elena Carter existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, with jarring suddenness, solid ground materialized beneath her feet. She stumbled forward, dropping to her knees in soft moss. The portal shimmered behind her for a few seconds more, giving her a final glimpse of Lyra facing down Vex and his pack, one russet wolf standing defiant against many. Then the opening collapsed in on itself, leaving only undisturbed forest air. Elena found herself kneeling in a grove of massive trees unlike any she'd ever seen, their trunks wider than her car, their canopy so high it seemed to touch the clouds. Golden light filtered through the leaves, casting the entire scene in an otherworldly glow. She wasn't on the mountain anymore. She wasn't even sure she was in the same world. Looking down, she opened her trembling hand. The heart of Fenrir still rested in her palm, but something had changed. The gold threads within pulsed with renewed vigor, and the stone seemed to radiate contentment, as if it had brought her exactly where she needed to be. "Kian," she whispered, grief welling up as she remembered what his sacrifice had cost. "Sorry, don't be," said a familiar voice behind her. "I'm harder to kill than that?" Elena whirled around, heart leaping to her throat. Standing at the edge of the grove, bruised and bloodied but very much alive, was Kian. His clothes were torn, revealing wounds that were already beginning to heal, and exhaustion lined his face. But his golden eyes were as intense as ever, fixed on her with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "How?" she gasped, stumbling to her feet. Vex. The challenge wasn't as decisive as he thought. Kian moved toward her, his gait slightly uneven but strengthening with each step. "I let him believe he'd won. Played dead, essentially. An old wolf trick." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "When the pack followed you, I slipped away. Followed your scent to the northern passage. But the portal, how did you—" "I saw it closing," he said, now standing directly before her. "Made a leap of faith." His gaze dropped to the stone still clutched in her hand. "The heart led me to you, as it always would." Elena's mind spun with questions about where they were, about what happened next, about the strange connection between them that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. But as Kian reached out, his fingers gently closing over hers around the heart of Fenrir, only one question seemed to matter. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kian looked around at the ancient grove, then back to her, his eyes reflecting the golden light filtering through the leaves. Now, he said softly, we find the keeper, and we begin again. Section 8. The Ancient Grove. The air in the grove tasted different, sweeter, heavier with oxygen, as if the massive trees around them produced more of it than should be possible. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the strange vitality seep into her exhausted body, easing the burn in her muscles and the throbbing ache of overexertion. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice hushed in the cathedral-like space beneath the towering canopy. Kian moved slowly through the grove, his golden eyes scanning their surroundings with a mixture of wonder and recognition. His wounds were visibly healing, scratches closing, bruises fading from angry purple to yellowish green before her eyes. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "The old texts speak of places between, sanctuaries that exist apart from the normal world, accessible only through the heart." He touched the trunk of the nearest tree, his fingers tracing patterns in the silvery bark. "I believe this is one of them." Elena followed his example, placing her palm against another massive trunk. The bark felt warm beneath her touch, almost vibrating with life. "It feels aware." "It may well be." Kian's expression was solemn. The ancient civilization that created shifters had a deeper understanding of the connection between all living things than we do now. These places were designed to heal, to shelter those who served as guardians. As if in response to his words, the golden light filtering through the canopy intensified, bathing them in warmth. Elena watched in amazement as the last of Kian's visible wounds sealed themselves, leaving unblemished copper skin where torn flesh had been moments before. "You're healing," she said, stepping closer to examine the miracle. "So are you," he replied, gesturing to her arms. Elena looked down in shock. The scratches she'd received when carrying him through the storm, seemingly a lifetime ago now, were fading before her eyes, the skin knitting together, leaving only the faintest pink lines that were rapidly disappearing. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "The heart brought us here for a reason." Kian's gaze moved to the green stone still clutched in her hand. "It responded to your need, our need, for safety, for healing." Elena opened her palm, studying the strange artifact. Its gold threads continued to pulse rhythmically, but the pattern had changed, slower now, steadier, like a heartbeat at rest. "You said we need to find the keeper," she said, looking up from the stone. "Is she here? In this place between?" Kian shook his head. "I don't think so, but I believe the heart will guide us to her when we're ready." He glanced around the grove. "For now, we should rest, recover our strength. We're safe here. The pack can't follow us through a portal they didn't see created." The mention of the pack brought a rush of memories. Vex's cold fury, the desperate fight, Lyra standing alone against her former packmates. "Lyra stayed behind," Elena said quietly. "She helped me escape. She told me to tell you she was sorry." Something like grief flickered across Kian's features. "Lyra always had more courage than sense." He sighed. "She and I grew up together in the pack. She was like a sister to me until—" "Until what?" Elena prompted when he fell silent. "Until Vex became Alpha and everything changed." Kian's expression darkened. He saw potential in her that the previous Alpha hadn't recognized, made her his second, his confidant, eventually his mate. She loved him, Elena realized, remembering the conflict in Lyra's eyes. Yes, but in the end she chose truth over loyalty. A sad smile touched his lips. "I hope she survives that choice." They lapsed into silence, both lost in thoughts of what they'd left behind. The grove seemed to respond to their mood, the golden light softening to a gentler glow that caressed rather than overwhelmed. Elena's exhaustion finally caught up with her. The adrenaline that had carried her through their desperate escape was ebbing, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. She sank down onto a bed of soft moss at the base of one of the massive trees, her back against its trunk. "You should sleep," Kian said, noticing her fatigue. "We both should." "The grove will protect us. How can you be sure?" Elena asked, though she could already feel her eyelids growing heavy. "Because this place was made for us, for shifters and humans working together." He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural warmth radiating from his body. "The heart wouldn't have brought us here if it wasn't safe." The logic was circular, but Elena was too tired to argue. Besides, something about the grove did feel inherently secure, as if the massive trees themselves stood guard over them. Her last conscious thought before drifting into sleep was of the strange path that had led her here, from a stormy mountain road to an ancient sanctuary, guided by a wolf who became a man. Elena dreamed of running through endless forests, paws silent on the earth, moonlight silvering her path. The joy of the hunt sang in her blood. The wind carried messages her human nose could never detect, and beside her ran a midnight black wolf whose golden eyes reflected starlight. They were one with the forest, one with each other, bound by something deeper than blood or oath. They were guardians, protectors, their dual nature a bridge between worlds that were never meant to be separate. The dream shifted. She stood in a vast chamber much like the one beneath the mountain, but intact, pristine, illuminated by the same golden light that filled the grove. Around her moved beings both familiar and strange, humans working alongside shifters, but also others, forms she couldn't quite comprehend. They gathered around a central dais where the heart of Fenrir, larger than she remembered, its green surface unmarred by time, pulsed with living light. The beings spoke in voices that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her mind. The bond must be preserved. The guardians must endure. When the time comes, they will be needed again. The scene dissolved, reforming into something darker. She saw shifters hunted, humans who feared what they didn't understand, ancient knowledge lost or deliberately destroyed. The separation growing, widening, until neither side remembered their shared purpose. And beneath it all, something waited, patient, hungry, watching from shadows that existed between worlds. "They will return," whispered a voice unlike the others, cold, ancient, filled with malice. "And we will be ready." Elena woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. The grove was darker now. The golden light faded to a soft amber glow that suggested twilight. Beside her, Kian stirred, his eyes opening instantly with predator awareness. "What is it?" he asked, alert despite having been asleep moments before. "A dream," she said, trying to hold on to the fading images. "Or maybe a memory. I saw us, shifters and humans working together. And something else, something watching, waiting." Kian's expression grew solemn. "The old enemy. What? The reason shifters were created in the first place." He sat up straighter, fully awake now. "The records in the heart speak of threats that existed before recorded history. Beings that came from beyond our world, that fed on fear and chaos." A chill ran down Elena's spine, remembering the malevolent presence she'd sensed in her dream. "Are they still out there? These beings?" "I don't know," Kian admitted. "The records are fragmented, unclear. But there are references to cycles, to periods of dormancy followed by return." He looked troubled. "Vex believes they're nothing but myths, stories created to give purpose to our existence. But I've always wondered—" He trailed off, his gaze distant. Elena waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "Recent years have seen changes," he finally continued. "Increased hostility between packs, strange behaviors in animals, unseasonal storms. Small things easily dismissed individually. Together," he shook his head. "Call it instinct, but something doesn't feel right in the world." The conviction in his voice resonated with Elena's own sense of unease, a feeling that had been growing in her long before she'd encountered him on that rain-soaked road. Climate change, political unrest, the sense that civilization was fraying at the edges, all easily explained by human factors, and yet, what if they are returning? She asked quietly. "These ancient enemies? Then the old alliance needs to be rebuilt." Kian's golden eyes met hers, intense with purpose. Humans and shifters, working together again as guardians. The idea seemed impossible. How could such a partnership be forged when most humans didn't even know shifters existed? When those who did, like Vex, saw humans as threats or inferiors? Before she could voice these doubts, a change came over the grove. The amber twilight began to brighten, shifting back to the golden glow they'd first encountered. But this time, the light concentrated in one direction, creating what appeared to be a path between the massive trunks. Simultaneously, the heart of Fenrir, which Elena had placed carefully on the moss beside her, began to pulse more rapidly, its gold threads brightening in rhythm with the illuminated path. "It's time," Kian said, rising to his feet and offering her his hand. "The grove is showing us the way forward." Elena took his hand, allowing him to pull her up. Their fingers remained intertwined as she retrieved the heart with her free hand. "Forward to what?" she asked. "To the Keeper," he replied, "and to whatever comes next." The illuminated path led them deeper into the grove, winding between trees that grew impossibly larger the further they went. The massive trunks were covered in the same spiral symbols Elena had seen in the cave system, but here they glowed faintly with inner light, as if the trees themselves were inscribed with living text. "Can you read them?" she asked, gesturing to the markings. "Parts," Kian admitted. "The old language is complex, more conceptual than literal. These seem to be stories, histories of guardianship." They continued in contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena found herself hyper-aware of Kian's presence beside her, the warmth of his hand in hers, the fluid grace of his movements, the occasional brush of his shoulder against hers when the path narrowed. She wasn't sure when the dynamic between them had shifted from desperate allies to something more intimate, more charged with possibility. Perhaps it had been building since that first moment of connection on the rain-soaked road, his wolf eyes meeting hers with unmistakable intelligence, her instinctive decision to help him despite all logic. "The blood bond," she said suddenly, remembering Vex's words in the cave. "You said it creates a connection. Is that why—" She hesitated, unsure how to articulate the strange pull she felt toward him. Kian glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the golden light. "The blood bond opens a channel, nothing more. What flows through that channel is determined by those involved." His voice softened. "What do you feel, Elena?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. She considered deflecting, making light of it. But something about this place, about the journey they'd shared, demanded honesty. "I feel like I've known you longer than 2 days," she admitted. "Like there's a resonance between us that doesn't make rational sense." She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. That probably sounds crazy. Not to a shifter. Kian's fingers tightened gently around hers. "We live with one foot in the instinctual world. We recognize connections that bypass logic, that exist on a deeper level. And this connection? What is it to you?" He was silent for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. In the old stories, there are accounts of shifters finding human partners who complemented them perfectly, whose strengths balanced their weaknesses, whose perspective widened their understanding of the world. His golden eyes met hers. Such pairings were considered sacred, blessed by whatever power created us both. The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to give it voice. Elena's heart beat faster, her mind struggling to process the suggestion that their meeting had been something more than chance, that perhaps, on some level beyond conscious understanding, they had been drawn to each other for a purpose. Before she could formulate a response, the path before them opened into a clearing unlike anything they had yet encountered. In the center stood a structure that seemed to grow directly from the forest floor, a dwelling formed of living wood, its walls curved and organic, windows glowing with warm light from within. The path of golden illumination led directly to its doorway, where a figure stood waiting, a woman, tall and straight-backed despite her apparent age, with silver hair that cascaded unbound to her waist. She wore simple clothing of undyed cloth, and around her neck hung a stone similar to the heart of Fenrir, but blue where theirs was green. "The Keeper," Kian breathed, his posture straightening with respect. The woman inclined her head in acknowledgement. her ageless eyes, a startling violet that seemed to shift in the light, assessing them both. "Welcome. Guardians," she said, her voice rich and melodious. "You've traveled a long road to reach this place. You know why we've come?" Kian asked. A smile touched the woman's lips. "The heart does not guide those who are not needed." Her gaze shifted to Elena. "And it does not accept the touch of those who are not worthy." Elena felt a flush rise to her cheeks under the keeper's penetrating gaze. I was just trying to help, as guardians always do." The woman stepped aside, gesturing to the doorway behind her. "Come, there is much to discuss, and time moves differently in the grove. What seems like moments here may be days in the world you left behind." That thought sent a jolt of alarm through Elena. "My aunt, she'll be worried sick if she can't reach me." Time enough to address such concerns, the keeper assured her. "First, you must understand what you've become part of, what the heart has chosen you for." With those cryptic words, she turned and entered the dwelling. After exchanging a glance, Kian and Elena followed, still hand in hand. The heart of Fenrir pulsing steadily against Elena's palm as if in approval. The interior of the dwelling was a single circular chamber, larger than seemed possible from outside. The walls were lined with shelves containing objects of obvious antiquity, scrolls, books, strange devices that seemed neither fully mechanical nor fully organic. At the center was a low table surrounded by cushions, upon which sat a simple wooden box inlaid with the now familiar spiral symbols. "Sit," the keeper instructed, lowering herself gracefully onto one of the cushions, "and place the heart on the table before you." Elena did as asked, reluctantly releasing Kian's hand to set the green stone on the polished surface. The keeper removed her own blue stone and placed it opposite, creating a balance of color, green and blue, like earth and sky. "You have questions?" the woman said. "Not a query, but a statement of fact. Ask." Elena and Kian exchanged another glance, a silent communication passing between them. Kian nodded slightly, yielding the first question to her. "Who are you?" Elena asked, deciding to start with the most basic point of confusion. "What is a keeper?" The silver-haired woman smiled, as if pleased with the directness of the question. "I have been known by many names over many lifetimes. Keeper is a title, not an identity. It means I stand guard over knowledge that was nearly lost, the true history of your kinds, and the purpose for which you were joined." "Lifetimes?" Kian interjected. "How long have you existed?" The woman's violet eyes twinkled with something like amusement. "Longer than you might believe, young guardian. The grove sustains me as it will sustain you for as long as you remain within it." She gestured to the blue stone before her. "The heart of Aegir, sister to your heart of Fenrir, extends my natural span. I have watched over this sanctuary since the great cataclysm that divided your peoples." Elena tried to process this implication of near immortality, filing it away as one more impossible thing to accept in a world that had been turned upside down in less than 48 hours. "You called us guardians," she said instead, focusing on the present. "What exactly are we guarding against?" The keeper's expression grew solemn. "That is the essential question, is it not?" She opened the wooden box, removing what appeared to be a crystalline disc about 6 inches in diameter. "Perhaps it is better shown than told." She placed the disc between the two heartstones. Immediately it began to glow, projecting an image above the table, similar to what they had seen in the mountain chamber but more focused. More detailed, Elena watched, transfixed, as the projection showed Earth from space, then zoomed in to reveal civilizations far more advanced than historical records suggested had existed. Cities of crystal and living material, transport that moved through sky and sea with equal ease, a harmony between humanity and nature that seemed utopian. "Before the written histories you know," the keeper narrated, "Earth hosted civilizations whose understanding of the connection between matter and energy, between consciousness and reality, far surpassed what exists today. They did not distinguish between what you now call science and spirituality. To them, all was one unified field of knowledge." The image shifted. showing beings that appeared human, working alongside others that defied easy categorization, some animal-like, others more abstract in form. They had achieved a harmony with other sentient species, both those native to Earth and those who came as visitors from beyond your stars. Elena's eyebrows rose at this casual mention of extraterrestrial contact, but she remained silent, absorbing the revelations as best she could. The projection darkened, showing a shadow falling across the idyllic world, a disturbance that seemed to originate from a rift or tear in the fabric of reality itself. But their very success, their manipulation of energetic fields and dimensional boundaries, drew attention from elsewhere. The Keeper's voice grew darker. There are spaces between worlds, rifts in reality where consciousness exists in forms alien to your understanding. Some of these entities feed on fear, on chaos, on the suffering of sentient beings. They found in Earth a banquet of potential emotion. If only they could access it. The projection showed shadowy, amorphous forms seeping through cracks in reality, corrupting what they touched, turning harmony to discord, cooperation to conflict. The invasion began subtly. Dreams corrupted, thoughts twisted, perception altered. By the time the danger was fully recognized, the entities had gained footholds in reality. The Keeper's violet eyes reflected the shifting images. What followed was a war unlike any your history's record, fought not just with physical weapons, but with consciousness itself as the battlefield. The projection showed devastating conflicts, cities falling, reality itself seeming to warp and tear in places. But it also showed resistance, humans and other beings working together to create protective barriers, to heal the rifts. In this darkest hour, a solution was proposed, a new type of guardian, one that could bridge the physical and spiritual realms, that could perceive the subtle corruptions these entities used to gain entrance. The Keeper nodded toward Kian. The shifters were created, beings with the intelligence and adaptability of humans, but with the instinctual awareness and sensory acuity of wolves. Elena glanced at Kian, finding him transfixed by the images, his golden eyes reflecting the projected light. The revelation seemed to affect him deeply, the confirmation of what he had suspected, the purpose his kind had been created to fulfill. Working together, the Keeper continued, humans and shifters pushed back the invasion, sealing the rifts, driving the entities back into the spaces between. But the victory came at great cost. The projection showed a final, cataclysmic battle, ending in a massive energetic pulse that seemed to sweep across the entire planet. Civilization crumbled, technology failed, and survivors were scattered, reduced to far simpler existence. The final defense required such power that it destroyed much of what had been built. The survivors remembered their past as legends, myths, dreams of a golden age. The Keeper's voice held ancient sorrow. Over generations, the truth faded. Shifters and humans, once partners, grew apart, one retreating into secrecy, the other forgetting what had once been. The projection faded, leaving the table illuminated only by the soft glow of the two heart stones. But the entities were not destroyed, the Keeper concluded, her violet eyes moving between Elena and Kian. Only contained, and the barriers weaken over time, requiring renewal, vigilance. The cycles you mentioned, Kian said quietly. Periods of dormancy followed by return, the Keeper nodded. Yes, and I fear we are nearing the end of a dormancy period. The signs are appearing again, subtle at first as always. Dreams disturbed, conflicts arising where none should exist, nature itself responding to pressures beyond normal understanding. The unseasonal storms, Elena murmured, remembering Kian's earlier concerns. The increased aggression between packs? Precisely. The Keeper looked pleased at their understanding. The entities feed on discord, on fear. They nurture it, amplify it, use it to thin the barriers between their realm and ours. And we're supposed to stop them? Elena couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Just the two of us against interdimensional shadow monsters? To her surprise, the Keeper laughed, a warm, genuine sound that softened her ageless features. No, child. not alone. You are the beginning, the catalyst. She gestured to the heart of Fenrir, still pulsing steadily on the table. The heart chose you both. A shifter who sought truth despite all cost, a human who followed instinct over reason. Together, you represent the partnership that must be rebuilt. The pack will never accept this, Kian said, his expression troubled. Vex has spent years consolidating power, reinforcing the belief in shifter superiority. And humans, he glanced at Elena. Most would react with fear, with violence. Most, but not all, the keeper replied. There have always been those on both sides who sensed the connection, who yearned for the lost partnership. Her violet eyes took on a knowing gleam. Like your friend Lyra, who may have surprised even herself with her choice. The mention of Lyra brought a fresh wave of concern. Is she alive? Elena asked. After helping us escape? The keeper's expression softened. The grove exists apart from normal time and space. I cannot see the specific outcomes of events still unfolding, but I can tell you that courage such as hers rarely goes unrewarded in the greater balance. It wasn't the reassurance Elena had hoped for, but she sensed it was all they would get for now. So what happens next? Kian asked, bringing them back to the immediate question. How do we begin rebuilding this partnership? The keeper rose gracefully, moving to one of the shelves that lined the walls. She returned with what appeared to be an ancient map, unfolding it carefully on the table beside the heartstones. There are others like you, humans and shifters who have maintained connections, often without fully understanding their purpose. Her finger traced lines on the map, indicating locations scattered across continents. Some exist in isolated communities, preserving traditions they no longer fully comprehend. Others are individuals, drawn together by what they would call coincidence or fate. How do we find them? Elena asked, studying the map with growing interest. It showed the modern world, but with overlays of flowing, lines and nodes that seemed to represent something. Beyond physical geography, the hearts will guide you, the keeper indicated, the green stone before Elena. They were created not just as repositories of knowledge, but as keys to the network that once connected all guardians. And when we find these others, Kian said slowly, we warn them about what's coming, try to prepare them for some kind of interdimensional invasion. You share the truth, the keeper corrected gently, about your shared past, your shared purpose. The understanding itself begins to heal the rift between your kinds, and in doing so, strengthens the barriers that protect your world. She reached out, placing one hand over the heart of Fenrir and the other over her own blue stone. A soft pulse of light passed between them. The heart has awakened fully now. It will show you the way to the nearest potential allies. Her violet eyes held theirs with solemn intensity. But be warned, the entities are subtle, insidious. They will sense your purpose and seek to thwart it, working through those whose minds are susceptible to their influence. Vex, Kian said grimly. His increased aggression, his obsession with shifter purity and separation, could he be influenced? Yes, the keeper nodded. Not controlled, these entities cannot directly possess, only suggest, enhance existing tendencies. But those with power who also harbor fear or hatred make perfect channels for their discord. Elena felt a chill at the implication. If powerful figures across the world, not just in shifter packs but in human governments and institutions, could be unwittingly influenced by these entities, the challenge before them was even more daunting than she had first realized. How do we stand against that kind of infiltration? She asked. We're just two people. Two who are bonded, the keeper reminded her, a gentle smile lifting the corners of her mouth. The connection between you is your greatest strength, your greatest protection. It creates a resonance the entities cannot easily penetrate or disrupt. She rose again, this time moving to the dwelling's entrance. Outside, the grove had shifted from golden daylight to soft, silver twilight, though whether hours or minutes had passed, Elena couldn't tell. You should rest once more before you leave, the keeper said. The grove will provide what you need. When you wake, the path back to your world will be clear, and your journey will truly begin. As she spoke, Elena felt the exhaustion of the day's revelations settle over her like a heavy blanket. Despite the comfort of the grove and its apparent healing properties, her mind had been stretched to its limits with new understanding, new possibilities, new fears. "One last question," she said, fighting through her fatigue. "The heart responded to me, a human. You said it only accepts the touch of those who are worthy. What makes me worthy when so many others aren't?" The keeper studied her for a long moment, those violet eyes seeming to see through to her very core. "The heart recognizes intention, child. It responds to those who seek balance, harmony, truth, who are willing to risk themselves for something greater." Her gaze shifted to include Kian. "In that, you and your shifter are perfectly matched. His quest for truth, your instinct to protect, two halves of the guardian spirit reunited." With those words, she moved to leave, pausing at the threshold of the dwelling. "Sleep now. When you wake, I will be gone, my role as guide completed for this cycle. The next steps of the journey are yours alone to determine." As the keeper disappeared into the silver twilight of the grove, Elena felt the weight of their new responsibilities settle onto her shoulders. Everything she had known about the world, about history, about her own place in the grand scheme of things, had been irrevocably altered. Yet as she looked at Kian, his golden eyes meeting hers with shared understanding, shared purpose, she felt something else alongside the trepidation, a sense of rightness, of belonging that transcended rational explanation. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly, seeming to read her thoughts. Elena considered the question seriously. 2 days ago, she had been driving to her aunt's cabin for a quiet weekend retreat, a chance to think about her life, her future, the changes she wanted to make. Instead, she had found herself thrust into a reality beyond imagination, tasked with nothing less than helping to save the world from threats most people couldn't comprehend. By all rights, she should be overwhelmed, terrified, looking for any way to return to her normal life. Instead, she felt a growing certainty that this, however impossible it seemed, was where she was meant to be. "Yes," she said finally, her voice stronger than she expected. "I think I've been ready for something like this my whole life. I just didn't know what it was." Kian's smile was small but genuine, transforming his normally serious features. He extended his hand to her across the table, palm up in invitation. "Then let's get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we begin rebuilding what was lost." Elena placed her hand in his, feeling that now familiar resonance between them, the connection that the keeper had called their greatest strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever forces aligned against them, they would face them together, as guardians, as partners, as something new being forged from something ancient and nearly forgotten. The heart of Fenrir pulsed in rhythm with their joined hands, its green light mingling with the silver twilight of the grove, a promise, a guide, a beacon for the journey to come. Section 9. Return to the world dawn in the grove brought a different quality of light, not the golden glow of their arrival, nor the silver twilight of evening, but a pearlescent radiance that seemed to emanate from the massive trees themselves. Elena woke slowly, her body feeling more rested than it had in years despite sleeping on the ground. Beside her, Kian was already awake, sitting cross-legged with the heart of Fenrir cradled in his palms. "How long have you been up?" she asked, stretching muscles that should have been stiff but weren't. "Not long." He turned to her, his golden eyes reflecting the pearl-white light. "The grove is changing. Can you feel it?" Now that he mentioned it, Elena could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air seemed charged, expectant, as if the entire sanctuary was holding its breath. "The keeper?" she asked, looking around for the silver-haired woman. "Gone, as she said she would be." Kian nodded toward the dwelling where they'd received their revelation the night before. It remained, but looked somehow less substantial in the morning light, more like a natural formation than a constructed shelter. "But she left this for us." He held out a small leather pouch. Elena opened it to find provisions, dried fruit and nuts, a small container of what appeared to be honey, and 2 vials of clear liquid. "Water?" she asked, uncorking one and sniffing cautiously. "Something more, I think." Kian took the other vial, studying it against the light. The old texts speak of elixirs that strengthened the bond between guardians, enhanced their natural abilities, their connection to each other. Elena recorked her vial, suddenly wary. "Are you suggesting we drink some mysterious liquid left by a woman who claims to be centuries old?" A hint of a smile touched Kian's lips. "When you put it that way, it does sound inadvisable." He tucked his vial into his pocket. "Perhaps we save these for when we truly need them." She nodded, relieved by his caution, and returned her vial to the pouch. As she did, her fingers brushed against something else. A small, intricately carved wooden disc about the size of a poker chip. One side bore the same spiral symbol they'd seen throughout the grove and caves. The other showed a wolf and human figure standing back-to-back within a circle. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up. Kian leaned closer, his expression thoughtful. "A token of some kind. Perhaps a key, like the heart itself, but for different doors." Before they could speculate further, a change came over the grove. The pearlescent light concentrated, forming a pathway similar to the one that had guided them to the keeper's dwelling, but this one led in the opposite direction, toward the edge of the grove where they had first arrived. "I think that's our cue," Elena said, rising to her feet and shouldering her backpack, which someone, presumably the keeper, had placed nearby. "Cleaned and restocked," Kian nodded, returning the heart to its place around his neck. "The question is, where and when are we returning to? The keeper said time moves differently here." That thought gave Elena pause. How long had they been gone from their own world? Hours, days? Would they emerge to find Vex and his pack still hunting them? Or would they return to a point where that threat had passed? Or perhaps hadn't even begun? "Only one way to find out," she said with more confidence than she felt, gesturing to the illuminated path. They followed the guiding light through the massive trees, the grove growing gradually less dense as they approached its boundary. The path led them to what appeared to be an archway formed by 2 towering trees that had grown together, their upper branches intertwined to create a perfect frame. Through this natural portal, Elena could see something. Not the mountainside they had left, but not clearly identifiable either. A shimmering, shifting view that refused to settle into a recognizable image. "The heart will guide us," Kian said, touching the green stone at his neck. "It brought us here. It will take us where we need to go next." Elena reached for his other hand, intertwining their fingers. "Together, then?" He nodded, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Together, with a shared breath, they stepped through the archway into the unknown. The transition was gentler this time, less the violent disorientation of their escape from the mountain, and more like walking through a curtain of cool mist. For a moment, the world around them blurred, shapes and colors melding into an indistinct haze. Then, with sudden clarity, their surroundings snapped into focus. They stood at the edge of a forest, but not the pine-covered mountains they had fled. These trees were different, deciduous, their spring leaves a vibrant green in the morning sunlight. Beyond the tree line stretched rolling hills and, in the distance, what appeared to be a small town nestled in a valley. "Where are we?" Elena asked, turning slowly to take in their new surroundings. Kian shook his head, looking equally bewildered. "Not where we left, that's certain." He closed his eyes, tilting his head back to scent the air. "We're further east, I think. The air tastes different, more humid." Elena pulled out her phone, hoping against hope that it might work here, wherever here was. To her surprise, it powered on, showing a weak signal. "I have reception," she said, tapping the screen. "And it's only been 3 days since the storm. 3 days since I found you on the road." Kian looked relieved. "The Grove's time distortion worked in our favor then. I'd feared we might emerge weeks or months later." The phone pinged with an incoming text message, one of several dozen that had apparently been waiting for a signal. Most were from her Aunt Claire, growing increasingly worried about her lack of communication. The most recent simply read, "Elena, Please call as soon as you get this. I'm out of my mind with worry. I need to call my aunt, Elena said, already dialing. She must be frantic. Kian nodded, stepping away to give her privacy, his attention turning to their surroundings with predator alertness. Assessing for threats, the call connected on the second ring. Elena? Claire's voice was tight with tension. Is that you? Where have you been? I've been calling for days. I'm okay, Elena assured her, guilt washing over her at the fear in her aunt's voice. I'm so sorry I didn't call sooner. There was an emergency. My phone didn't have reception. Emergency? What happened? Where are you? I went up to the cabin yesterday and found your car wrecked at the bottom of the road, but no sign of you. Elena winced, struggling to formulate a believable explanation that wouldn't involve shifters, interdimensional entities, or magical groves outside of normal time and space. I had an accident in the storm, she began, sticking as close to the truth as possible. I got lost in the woods trying to find help. I'm okay now, though. I'm with... She glanced at Kian, who was examining the heart of Fenrir, which appeared to be pulsing with a directional intensity. I'm with a friend. We're going to get things sorted out. A friend? What friend? Where are you? Claire's voice rose with renewed concern. Elena, there are search parties looking for you. I've been talking to the sheriff every day. I'm sorry, Elena repeated, genuinely remorseful for the worry she'd caused. Please tell them to call off the search. I'm safe, I promise. I'll explain everything when I can. But right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. This isn't like you, Elena, Claire finally said, her voice softer but no less worried. You've always been so... predictable, responsible. The observation struck Elena with unexpected force. Her aunt was right. Until 3 days ago, her life had been carefully planned, meticulously organized. She had been the person everyone could count on to do the sensible thing, to never rock the boat. Now here she was, standing in an unknown forest with a man who could transform into a wolf, embarking on a quest to find others like them and somehow prevent an interdimensional invasion. I know, she admitted, but sometimes life takes an unexpected turn. I need to follow this path for a while, see where it leads. She took a deep breath. I'll call you again soon, I promise. And I'll be careful. After a few more minutes of reassurance and vague explanation, Elena ended the call, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. She turned to find Kian watching her, his expression thoughtful. Family is important to you, he observed. Claire's the only close family I have left, Elena explained. My parents died when I was in college. She's been more than an aunt. She's been a friend, a mentor. She pocketed her phone. She deserves better than cryptic half-truths. Perhaps one day you can tell her everything, Kian said. If we succeed in what the Keeper has tasked us with, the world may be ready for such truths sooner than we think. The reminder of their mission brought Elena's focus back to their immediate situation. So where exactly are we? And where are we headed? Kian held up the heart, which was pulsing more strongly in one direction, toward the distant town. The heart is guiding us there, he said, nodding toward the valley. According to the Keeper, the nearest potential allies are in that direction. Elena studied the town through narrowed eyes. From this distance, it appeared to be a small rural community, perhaps a few thousand residents at most. Quaint buildings clustered around what might be a town square, with residential areas radiating outward. It looked peaceful, ordinary, hardly the place one would expect to find allies in a cosmic battle. Any idea who or what we're looking for? She asked. The Keeper said there were those who maintained connections between our kinds, often without understanding their purpose. Kian frowned thoughtfully. It could be individuals, or perhaps a community where shifters and humans coexist without realizing the historical significance of their arrangement. Well, I guess we start walking, Elena said, adjusting her backpack, though you might want to do something about your appearance first. Kian looked down at himself, seeming to realize for the first time how he must look, wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit, his copper skin marked with the faint traces of recently healed wounds, his long black hair wild and untamed. I suppose I don't exactly blend in. he acknowledged with a wry smile. Not unless we're heading to a wilderness survival convention. Elena rummaged in her backpack, producing a small travel brush she always carried. Here, at least tame the hair a bit. While Kian attempted to make himself more presentable, Elena checked her wallet, relieved to find her credit cards and some cash still intact. Whatever else they might face in their quest, at least they wouldn't be completely without resources. Once they were as ready as they could be, they set out toward the town, following both the heart's guidance and a dirt road that wound down from the forest edge into the valley. The morning was pleasant, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring flowers and distant water. "We need a cover story," Elena said as they walked. "For when we reach town, we can't exactly announce we're looking for shifters or humans with special connections." "Travelers passing through," Kian suggested. "Looking for work, perhaps." "It's simple and requires minimal explanation." "And our relationship?" Elena asked, then immediately felt heat rise to her cheeks at the potential implications of the question. "I mean, how do we explain why we're traveling together?" Kian seemed untroubled by the question. "The simplest explanation is often best. We're friends, companions on a journey." "Right." Elena nodded, feeling oddly disappointed by his matter-of-fact response. "Friends." They continued in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The road gradually improved as they approached the town, dirt giving way to gravel and finally to pavement. Signs began to appear, a weathered billboard advertising local businesses, a wooden placard welcoming visitors to Pine Creek Estarbor 1843, Pop 2756. Pine Creek, Elena read aloud. Doesn't exactly narrow down our location. There must be dozens of towns with that name across the country. "We're somewhere in the Appalachians," Kian said with certainty. "The vegetation, the terrain, I'd guess somewhere in Virginia or perhaps West Virginia." As they neared the town proper, they began to pass residential properties, modest homes with well-kept yards, many with gardens in full spring bloom. People went about their morning routines, retrieving newspapers from driveways, walking dogs, leaving for work. It all seemed so normal, so unaware of the cosmic threats the keeper had revealed. Yet as they walked, Elena noticed Kian growing increasingly alert, his head lifting occasionally to scent the air, his golden eyes scanning their surroundings with heightened attention. "What is it?" she asked quietly when she was sure no one was within earshot. "Shifters," he replied, his voice equally low. "I can smell them. Not just one or two, but many, perhaps dozens." Elena's eyes widened in surprise. "In a town this small? That many shifters living openly among humans?" "Not openly, I suspect," Kian said. "But yes, they're here, integrated into the community in a way I've never encountered before. The scents are mingled, homes shared." Before Elena could respond to this revelation, the heart of Fenrir pulsed more strongly beneath Kian's shirt, its glow visible even through the fabric. Simultaneously, a voice called out from across the street. "Well now, don't you two look like you've come a long way?" They turned to see an elderly man watching them from a front porch. White-haired, lean but strong-looking despite his advanced years, with keen blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He sat in a rocking chair, a mug of something steaming in his gnarled hands. "Just arrived in town," Elena confirmed, offering a friendly smile. "Is there somewhere you'd recommend for breakfast?" "We're famished." The old man studied them with unsettling intensity, his gaze lingering on Kian for a long moment before returning to Elena. "Mabel's Diner does a fine breakfast," he finally said, pointing down the main street. 2 blocks that way on your right. Can't miss it." He took a sip from his mug, then added casually, "Though I suspect you two aren't here for the food." Kian tensed beside her, his posture shifting subtly into something more alert. "More defensive. What makes you say that?" Elena asked, keeping her tone light despite the sudden tension. The old man's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Just a feeling. Strangers don't wander into Pine Creek by accident. Our little town's not exactly on the way to anywhere." He set down his mug and leaned forward in his rocker. "That stone around your neck," he added, nodding toward Kian. "Been a long time since I've seen its like." Kian's hand moved instinctively to the heart, now hidden beneath his shirt, but still pulsing with visible light. "You recognize it?" Instead of answering directly, the old man rose from his chair with surprising agility and descended the porch steps. "Mabel's can't wait," he said, approaching them. "I think you'd better come inside. We have much to discuss, Guardians." Elena exchanged a startled glance with Kian. The term the old man had used, the same one the keeper had called them, couldn't be coincidence. But was he friend or foe? Ally or threat? The heart pulsed more strongly, its rhythm seeming to align with the old man's proximity. Kian must have felt it too, for he gave Elena a slight nod, a signal that he believed they should trust this unexpected development. "Thank you," Elena said to the old man. "We'd appreciate that. Mr. Marshall," he supplied. "Thomas Marshall." He extended a hand to each of them in turn, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "But most folks around here just call me the Old Wolf." The casual use of the term sent a jolt through Elena. Beside her, Kian went completely still for a moment, then relaxed into a posture of profound respect. "It's an honor," he said quietly, inclining his head slightly. Thomas Marshall's blue eyes twinkled with amusement. "Save the formalities for someone who cares for them, young pup." "I've lived too long for such nonsense." He gestured toward his front door. "Come. Coffee's fresh, and I suspect your journey is just beginning." As they followed the old man into his home, Elena felt the weight of the wooden token in her pocket, the one the keeper had left them, carved with the symbols of wolf and human standing back to back within a circle. Perhaps they had found their first allies sooner than expected, or perhaps, she thought as Thomas Marshall closed the door behind them with a secretive smile, they had been found instead. The interior of Thomas Marshall's home was a curious blend of the ordinary and the extraordinary. At first glance, it appeared to be the comfortable dwelling of an elderly bachelor. Worn but well-kept furniture, bookshelves lining the walls, family photos in simple frames. But closer inspection revealed subtle differences. The books included ancient-looking tomes in languages Elena couldn't identify. Many of the photos showed people with the same distinctive amber eyes as Kian, and mounted discreetly near the ceiling in each corner were small objects that resembled dream catchers, but with unfamiliar symbols woven into their centers. "Protection wards," Thomas explained, noticing Elena's curious gaze. "Old magic, though we don't call it that anymore. Keeps conversations within these walls private from those with enhanced hearing." He gestured for them to sit on a well-used sofa while he settled into an armchair across from them. "Necessary in a town where nearly a third of the population has ears that can hear a whisper from 3 blocks away." "You're a shifter," Kian said. It wasn't a question. Thomas smiled, revealing teeth that remained remarkably strong and white despite his age. "Born and raised. 7th generation in Pine Creek." He nodded toward Elena. "And you, young lady, are human, yet you travel with a shifter who bears a heartstone and calls you partner. Fascinating times we live in. How do you know about the heart?" Elena asked, leaning forward intently. The keeper said most had forgotten the true history. "Most have," Thomas agreed. "But Pine Creek isn't like most places." He rose and moved to one of the bookshelves, removing what appeared to be an old leather-bound journal. "This town was founded in 1843, as the sign says, but its true beginnings go back much further." He opened the journal, revealing yellowed pages covered in handwritten text and detailed drawings, including one that unmistakably depicted the heart of Fenrir. "My ancestors were among the few who remembered the old partnership," Thomas continued. "After the great forgetting, after the separation began, they sought to preserve what they could of the ancient knowledge. They founded communities where shifters and humans could live together in harmony, even if the true purpose of that harmony had been lost to time. And Pine Creek is one such community," Kian said, understanding dawning in his golden eyes. Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. "One of the last. There were others once, scattered across the continent, across the world. Places where the old bonds were maintained, even if their meaning was forgotten." He sighed, closing the journal. Most have been lost now, absorbed into the modern world or torn apart by the growing distrust between our kinds. But not here, Elena observed. Here, shifters and humans still live together. How is that possible in today's world? How do you keep the secret? Thomas's blue eyes twinkled with mischief. Who says it's a secret, young lady? The humans of Pine Creek know exactly what their neighbors are. They've always known. The casual statement stunned both Elena and Kian into momentary silence. The idea of a community where humans knowingly coexisted with shifters, where the truth wasn't hidden or feared, seemed almost too hopeful to be true. But how? Kian finally asked. In my experience, humans who discover our existence react with fear, with hostility. Because they encounter it as adults with no context, no preparation, Thomas replied. Here, children grow up knowing. A classmate shifts for the first time during recess? Just another Tuesday in Pine Creek. He chuckled at their expressions. Don't look so shocked. It's worked this way for generations. But the outside world, Elena pressed. Government agencies, curious outsiders, how do you prevent discovery? Careful management, Thomas said, his expression growing more serious. We're selective about who settles here. We maintain a presence in law enforcement, local government, health services, and we're remote enough that we don't attract much attention. He smiled wryly. The modern world has its advantages. People are so absorbed in their screens, their distant dramas. They rarely notice what's happening in their own backyards, let alone in a small town in the Appalachian foothills. Kian leaned forward, his expression intent. The heart led us here specifically. The keeper said we would find allies, those who could help us rebuild the ancient partnership between our kinds. Thomas's gaze sharpened with interest. You've spoken with a keeper? Recently? 3 days ago, Elena confirmed. In a grove outside of time and space. She showed us the truth about shifters, about their creation, about the entities that threaten to return. The old man's expression grew grave. So it's beginning again. The cycle returns. He closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing a painful truth he'd long suspected. We felt it coming. Those of us old enough to recognize the signs. Dreams disturbed, tensions rising where none should exist, the balance shifting. Then you'll help us? Kian asked, hope evident in his voice. Thomas studied them both for a long moment, his keen blue eyes seeming to assess more than just their physical presence. Pine Creek exists because of a promise made generations ago, a promise to maintain the partnership, to be ready when the need arose again. He nodded slowly. Yes, young guardians, we'll help you. But our assistance comes with conditions. What conditions? Elena asked cautiously. First, that you stay long enough to truly understand what we've built here. Not just a community where shifters and humans coexist, but a model for what could be possible elsewhere. Thomas's voice took on a passionate intensity that belied his years. Second, that you share what you've learned from the Keeper, the complete truth, not just fragments. And third, Kian prompted when the old man paused. Thomas smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. Third, that you recognize the forces already aligned against you. The entities you seek to counter have been influencing our world for longer than you realize. Their agents, both knowing and unknowing, are everywhere. Vex, Kian murmured. My former alpha. The Keeper suggested he might be influenced by these entities. Likely, Thomas agreed, but he's just one among many. Power attracts their attention, their whispers. Those who hunger for control, for dominance, are particularly susceptible. He fixed them with a serious gaze. Which brings me to my warning. Your quest has only just begun, but I fear word of it is already spreading. The heart's activation in the mountain chamber would have sent ripples through the network. Ripples that can be felt by those attuned to such energies. Are you saying we're being hunted? Elena asked, a chill running down her spine at the thought. If not already, then soon, Thomas confirmed grimly. Not just by Vex and his pack, but by others who serve the entity's purpose, knowingly or not. The revelation cast a shadow over the hope they'd begun to feel at finding allies so quickly. Elena glanced at Kian, finding his expression resolute despite the warning. Then we have no time to waste. Kian said, his voice steady. "We need to learn what we can from you, find others like you, and build a network strong enough to counter whatever is coming." Thomas nodded, his aged face creasing into a smile of approval. Spoken like a true guardian. He rose from his chair with the same surprising agility he'd shown earlier. "But first, breakfast. Even those saving the world need to eat." As he led them toward his kitchen, Thomas paused, glancing back with a twinkle in his blue eyes. "And perhaps afterward you might like to meet our mayor." Remarkable woman. Shifted for the first time at age 12 during a school spelling bee. He chuckled at the memory. Won the competition anyway, even with paws instead of hands. "That's Pine Creek for you. Adaptable." Despite the weight of their mission and the warning they'd just received, Elena found herself smiling. If places like Pine Creek could exist, where the partnership between human and shifter endured, where difference was accepted rather than feared, perhaps there was hope after all. She caught Kian's eye as they followed their host, and saw in his golden gaze the same cautious optimism she felt. Their journey had only just begun, but already they had found proof that the world they sought to build was possible. Now they just had to protect it from the shadows gathering at the edges of reality. Shadows that, according to Thomas Marshall, were already aware of their awakening and moving to counter it. The hunt for the Guardians had begun. "The last time?" Elena echoed, her fingers tightening around the heart of Fenrir. Its glow pulsed erratically now, as if responding to her elevated heartbeat. Or perhaps to the presence of this strange, ragged man before them. Malric's amber eyes never left the stone. 52 years ago, not far from here." His voice had an odd cadence, like someone who hadn't spoken much to others in a very long time. "Breach opened up near Lake Michigan. Small at first, just dreams going bad, animals acting strange. Then people started changing." A truck rumbled past on the distant highway, its headlights briefly illuminating the parking lot before darkness swallowed it again. In that flash of light, Elena caught something in Malric's expression, a haunted depth that made her skin crawl. "You're a shifter," Kian said. Not a question, but a statement. His posture remained defensive, ready to move at the first sign of threat. Malric barked a harsh laugh. Am, something in between, maybe." He tilted his head, that too-animal gesture that reminded Elena of Lyra, of Kian himself. "Hard to be sure what I am these days. What do you mean by that?" Kian pressed, his voice carrying a warning edge. Instead of answering directly, Malric shrugged off the outermost layer of his mismatched coats. Then, with deliberate slowness that seemed designed not to startle them, he rolled up the sleeve of his flannel shirt. Elena gasped. The exposed forearm was a patchwork, human skin interspersed with patches of gray fur that seemed frozen mid-shift. The effect was disturbing, as if his transformation had somehow glitched, leaving him caught between forms. "Can't complete the change anymore," he said matter-of-factly, though pain shadowed his eyes. "Not since I got too close to what came through. Touched me, marked me." He rolled the sleeve back down. "Been stuck like this for decades. Not wolf enough for any pack, not human enough to live among them." "What exactly came through?" Elena asked, finding her voice despite the horror of what she'd seen. "The Keeper told us about entities, about rifts." "The Keeper?" Malric's head snapped up, his amber eyes widening. "You've spoken with a Keeper?" "Recently?" Kian and Elena exchanged a glance.